got shocked. He was startled, and as he was cutting the hair of a customer, he nicked the right ear of the customer. The customer yelled with pain and distress. So the customer becomes hurt and he shouts out in pain because of the cut and distress, because of the awful news he had just heard. With one side of his neck still unshaven, he sped across the road to the general merchant store where there was a telephone. So the customer who has still had one side of his chin unshaven gets out of the hair cutting salon and goes to the general merchant store where there was a telephone. So in those days, telephones were not so common. He dialed Seth Govindram's number. The Seth was not at home. Where was he then? The Seth was holidaying in Kashmir. Oh, was that so? The elderly gentleman did not believe it. He turned to the barber shop and told Deep Chand, "The bird has flown," means the bird has escaped from the cage. Seth Govindram has taken all the profits and gone away to Kashmir. Seth Govindram has left town. Definitely it means a collapse. And then he dashed out of the shop, making a beeline for his office and checkbook. So he wants to go to his office, take out his checkbook, and withdraw all the money he has in People Nagar Bank. The news spread through the bazaar with the rapidity of a forest fire. So, just as a forest fire in a forest jumps from tree to tree, the news of the collapse of People Nagar Bank, the supposed collapse, spread by word of mouth as rapidly as a forest fire. From the general merchants, it traveled to the shop, circulated among the customers, and then spread with them in various directions to the beetle seller, the tailor, the vendor, the jeweler, the beggar sitting on the pavement. So all the people were soon talking about the supposed collapse of People Nagar Bank. Old Ganpat, the beggar, had a crooked leg. He had been squatting on the pavement for years, calling out for alms. In the evening, someone would come with a bowl, with a barrow, and take him away. He had never been known to walk, but now, on learning that the bank was about to collapse, Ganpat astonished everyone, leaping up to his feet and actually running at top speed in the direction of the bank. It soon became known that he had 1,000 rupees in savings. So 1,000 rupees was a large sum in those days. Men stood in groups in street corners discussing the situation. People Nagar seldom had a crisis. People Nagar never had a problem. Seldom or never had floods, earthquakes, or drought. Drought is absence of rain, and the imminent crash of the People Nagar Bank set everyone talking and speculating. So everyone was speculating, they were talking what might happen, about the collapse that is imminent, that is about to happen. Speculating and rushing about in a frenzy. So everyone becomes panic stricken. Some based boasted of their farsightedness, congratulating themselves on having already taken out their money or never having put any in. So some congratulated themselves on having withdrawn all their money, or having some others having never put any money into People Nagar Bank. Others speculated on the reasons for the crash, putting it all down to excesses indulged in by Seth Govindram. The Seth Govindram has been living exorbitantly, is buying this or that, so that is the reason for the crash of People Nagar Bank. The Seth had fled the state, said one. The Seth had escaped from the state. He had fled the country, said a third. He had hanged himself from the tamarind tree, said a fourth, and had been found that morning by the sweeper boy. So all sorts of theories start circulating among the people. By noon, the small bank had gone through all its ready cash. So people come into the cash in bank and withdraw all their savings. So all the cash in the bank had been withdrawn, and the harassed manager was in a dilemma. The manager of the bank was in a problem. Emergency funds could only be obtained from another bank and some 30 miles distance. So they could get some funds only from the nearest bank, which was 30 miles away. and he won't have time to persuade the crowd to wait until then. The crowd wouldn't wait until the armored van went to the nearest bank and got back the money. The crowd was getting restless, and there was no way of contacting Seth Govindram on his houseboat in Kashmir. So Seth Govindram was on his houseboat in Kashmir. People were turned back from the counters and told to return the following day. They did not like the sound of that. So when they're told to return the next day, they think the bank really doesn't have any money. And so they gathered outside on the steps of the bank shouting, "Give us our money back or we'll break in. Fetch the safe." He's hiding in a safe deposit locker. Mischief makers who didn't have a paisa in the bank joined the crowds and aggravated the mood. So mischief makers went about saying, "The bank has really collapsed. Seth Govindaram has escaped." They gave such news, and the people became even more frenzied and angry. The manager stood at the door and tried to placate them. The manager stopped them and tried to calm them down, placate them. He declared that the bank had plenty of money but no immediate means of collecting it. He said the bank had lots of money but couldn't get it immediately. He urged them to go home and come back the next day. "We want it now," chanted some of the crowd. "Now, now, now." And a brick hurtled through the air and crashed against the plate glass window of the People's Nagar Bank. So one of the windows is broken by someone in the crowd who hurls a brick, who throws a brick through the air into the... Nathu arrived next morning to sweep the steps of the bank. He saw the refuse, he saw the garbage and the broken glass and the stones cluttering the steps. So there were all sorts of pieces of building, glass, bricks and stones lying on the steps. Raising his hands in a gesture of horror and disgust, he cried, "So how will I sweep all this?" So he raises his hands in a gesture of horror and disgust. "Hooligans, sons of donkeys," as though it wasn't enough to be paid late. It seems my work was also to be increased. He smote the steps with his broom, scattering the refuse. "Good morning, Nathu," said the washerman's boy getting down from his bicycle. "Are you ready to take up a job from the first of next month?" "You'll have to, I suppose. The bank is going out of business." "How's that?" said Nathu. "Haven't you heard? Well, you'd better wait here until half the population of People Nagar arrives to claim their money." And he waved cheerfully. So Sitaram is unworried by that. He did not have a bank account and sped away on his cycle. Nathu went back to sweeping the steps, muttering to himself. So Nathu muttered angrily to himself. When he had finished his work, he sat down on the side step to await the arrival of the manager. He was determined to get his pay. Who would have thought the bank would collapse? He said to himself and looked thoughtfully into the distance. I wonder how it could have happened. So, this is the story of the boy who broke the bank. Nathu, the sweeper boy, who unwittingly is the reason for the collapse of People Nagar Bank. Thank you. Hello, we'll do the lesson Oliver asked for more. So, this lesson is written without too much advanced vocabulary, so we can just read it almost. So, Oliver is Oliver Twist. The full name of Oliver in the title is Oliver Twist. And Oliver Twist is a story by the Victorian author Charles Dickens. So Oliver asks for more. So we'll read the story. As I said, it's it's written in very deceptively simple language. So there won't be much to explain. So we'll just read the story. Among other buildings in a town in England, there was a house for poor people who had no money and nowhere to live. This was called the workhouse. Oliver Twist was born in the workhouse. His mother, a young woman, lay ill in bed. A doctor and an old woman stood by her side. So Oliver's mother had just given birth to him, and beside her there was a doctor and an old woman who was called a midwife. She lifted her head from the pillow. So Oliver's mother lifts her head from the pillow and she says, "Let me see the child and die," she said. "Oh, you mustn't talk about dying yet," said the doctor. So the doctor tries to offer her some comfort, and the old woman says, "No, dear," said the old woman, "you're too young to die." The young woman shook her head. So the young woman disagrees and held out her hand towards the child. So she wants to see her child. And then the doctor put the child in her arms. She pressed her cold white lips to its face and then fell back. So she kisses her child and then she falls back on the pillow. "She is dead," said the doctor. "Yes, poor dear," said the old woman, and she took the child away from its dead mother. Poor dear. So she sympathizes with the mom. "She was a good looking girl," said the doctor as he put on his hat and gloves. "And uh, where did she come from?" "She was brought here last night," said the old woman. "She was lying in the street." So Oliver's mother was lying in the street. They brought her to this hospital, to the workhouse, and she had given birth, and then she had died. She had walked a long way, and her shoes had uh, had holes in them. So she had walked for such a long distance that her shoes were falling apart. They were torn. Nobody knows where she came from or where she was going to. So she is an anonymous young girl, and she has walked a long way, and then somebody finds her on the street and they bring her to the hospital. She gives birth, and that's it. The doctor raised the dead woman's left hand. The usual story. I see that she has no ring on her finger. The doctor examines her left hand and there's no ring. So the woman had been made pregnant by somebody, and she had walked away from that place. But once she reached this place, she was too weak to carry on. So she just collapsed in the street. So she was unmarried and she had been made pregnant and she had given birth. There was no ring on her finger. "Good night," said the doctor to the old woman. He went home to his dinner. The old woman sat down on a chair in front of the fire and began to dress the baby. The midwife, the old woman, dresses the baby in front of the fire. She dressed him in very old clothes used for babies who were born in the workhouse. So in that workhouse, many babies had been born. So the clothes were very old, they had been used many times. So she dresses this newborn infant in those old clothes. The child was an orphan. An orphan is one who is without parents, born into a world which had no love or pity for him. So the child was born into a house where no one was there to love it or no one to take pity on it and care for it. No one was able to discover who the baby's father was. So they make inquiries, but they can't find out who the baby's father was or what his mother's name was. Mr. Bumble, an important officer in the town, invented a name for the baby. He chose the name Oliver Twist. So Mr. Bumble is one of the bearers of office in the town council. So he invents a name for the new baby. He calls the baby Oliver Twist. We name the new babies here in the order from A to Z. So as the babies come in, the first baby will be named from A, from the letter A, Arthur, like that, Andrew, And the second baby which comes into the workhouse will be named with the letter B, Brian, or also like that. They name the babies from A to Z. They explain when people ask, I named the last one Swabble. This one is Twist. So the previous baby had been named with an S. So this baby is called Twist. The next one will be Unwin. So STU. At the age of 9, Oliver was a pale, thin child. He and the other workhouse boys never had enough warm clothes or food. So in the workhouse, they deprived the children of food or warm clothes. So it's very cheap, cold in the workhouse, and they don't have warm clothes, and they're not fed properly. So Oliver was a pale, thin child. They were given only 3 meals of thin soup every day. So the soup they were given 3 times a day was diluted. They were given 3 meals of thin soup every day. On Sundays they had a small piece of bread. They were fed in a big hall. A large pot stood at one end of the room, and the soup was served by the master. So the master is probably the person who is the manager of the workhouse. So there was a large pot full of this thin soup, and the children used to line up and get their share of the soup. Each boy had one small bowl of soup and no more. So they were only allowed one small bowl. The bowls never needed washing because the boys cleaned them with their spoons until they shone. So the boys used to drink up every last drop of that soup, and they used to clean the bowls with their spoons so that the bowls used to shine after the boys had had their meal from them. One day, Oliver and his friends decided that one boy would walk up to the master after supper and ask for more soup. So the boys became so hungry one day that they decided that one of them would walk up to the master and ask for more soup. Oliver was chosen. So the boy who would ask the master was Oliver. And this was very dangerous because the master would become very angry and no one knew what he would do. In the evenings, the boy sat down at the tables. The, the master stood by the pot and the soup was served. The soup disappeared quickly. The boys whispered and made signs to Oliver. So they signaled to Oliver to go and ask for more. He stood up from the table and went to the master with his bowl and spoon in his hands. Please, sir, he said, I want some more. The master was a fat, healthy man, but he was very pale. So the master used to eat well. He was a fat, healthy man, but he was very pale. He looked with surprise at the small boy. What? Said the master at last in a quiet voice. What? Please, sir, repeated Oliver. I want some more. The master hit Oliver with the spoon, then seized him and cried for help. So the master becomes very angry, hits Oliver with the spoon, then grabbed hold of him and cried for help. Bumble rushed into the room and the master told him what Oliver had said. Uh, he asked for more. Bumble cried, I cannot believe it. One day they will hang the boy. So according to Mr. Bumble, asking for more soup when he was hungry was a crime that had never been committed before. And if Oliver continued in this way, he would be hung. He'd become an adult and he'd become a criminal and he would be hung. So they took Oliver away and shut him in a dark room. The next morning, a notice appeared on the workhouse gate. £5 were offered to anybody who would take Oliver Twist. So They advertised that they had a boy who needed to be taken care of, and if anybody took Oliver Twist off their hands, or the person who take Oliver Twist would be given £5. Oliver was a prisoner in that cold dark room for a whole week. Every morning he was taken outside to walk, and Mr. Bumble beat him with a stick. Then he was taken into the large hall where the boys had their food. Mr. Bumble beat him in front of everybody. He cried all day. So Mr. Bumble makes an example of Oliver. He beats Oliver. When night came, he tried to sleep, but he was cold, lonely, and frightened. So as a 9-year-old boy who's been treated like this, and he cannot sleep, and he's cold, lonely, and frightened. But one day, outside the high workhouse gate, Mr. Bumble met Mr. Sowerberry. Mr. Sowerberry was a tall, thin man who wore black clothes, and he took Oliver Twist off Mr. Bumble's hands, and he got £5. So that is the story of Oliver asked for more. Thank you. Hello, today we'll do the lesson The Homecoming by Rabindranath Tagore. So, it says, Patik Chakravarti was ringleader among the boys of the village. A new mischief got into his head. So, Patik Chakravarti is a boy who lives in a village. In the village, there are a number of boys, and he was ringleader. That is, the boys. They formed a gang, and they went about the village doing mischief. So he was ringleader among the boys of the village, and now what happens is a new mischief got into his head. He took it into his head that he wanted to do something. There was a heavy log lying in the mud flat of the river, waiting to be shaped into a mast for a boat. So, in the river, when it is low tide, when the water recedes from the shore, it leaves a mud flat. And in the mud flat, there was a heavy log, a heavy tree trunk lying in the middle of the mud flat. And that log should could be shaped into a mast for a boat. A mast is the place where the sails are held for the boat. He decided that they should all work together to shift the log by main force from its place and roll it away. So Patik Chakravarti decided that all the boys should get together, they should work together to move the log by force, by brute force, to roll it away from the mud flat. The owner of the log would be angry and surprised, and they would all enjoy the fun. So the owner of that log lying in the mud flat would be angry because his log would have been taken away by the boys, and but he wouldn't know who had rolled it away. So they would all enjoy the fun of everyone seconded the proposal, and it was carried unanimously. All the boys supported Patik in this enterprise, and all of them decided together to carry out their plan. But just as the fun was about to begin, Makan, Patik's younger brother, sauntered up and sat down on the log in front of them all without a word. So Makan is Patik's younger brother, and he walks up in a relaxed manner and sits down on the log without saying a single word. The boys were puzzled. For a moment, he was pushed rather timidly by one of the boys and told to get up, but he remained quite unconcerned. So one of the boys just gives him a nudge and tells him to move, but Makan remains rather unconcerned. He appeared like a young philosopher meditating on the futility of games. So Makan was a rather studious young boy, and he sits there, seems to be meditating about the uselessness or futility of games. Patik was furious. Makan, he cried, if you don't get down this minute, I'll thrash you. So Patik threatens Makan that he will thrash him. Makan only moved to a more comfortable position. So Makan doesn't react at all. He lies down even more comfortable. Now, if Patik was to keep his regal dignity before the public, it was clear he ought to carry out his threat. So Patik is the leader. So he should do what he says. He should thrash Makan. Otherwise, his dignity would be lost. His position of leadership would be lost if he didn't carry out his threat, his regal dignity, his kingly dignity as leader of the voice. But his courage failed him at the crisis. So Patik doesn't becomes less courageous when it comes to thrash Makan. He, his fertile brain, however, rapidly seized upon a new maneuver which would discomfit his brother and afford his followers an added amusement. But however, his mind was active, his brain, his fertile brain, came up with an idea and he thought of a new maneuver, he thought of a new plan which would make his brother uncomfortable, which would make him feel discomforted and afford the boys of the village, Patik's followers, an added amusement. He gave the word of command to roll the log and Makan over together. So he told the boys to roll the log with Makan on it. Makan heard the order and made it a point of honor to stick on. So Makan becomes stubborn. He makes it a point of honor to stay on the log. But he overlooked the fact, like those who attempt earthly fame or in other matters, that there was peril in it. But what Makan had not foreseen, was the peril or the danger in staying on the log. He was just like others who attempt to do something great on the earth. He overlooks the danger inherent in the enterprise. The boys began to heave at the log with all their might, calling out, 1, 2, 3, go. So all the boys come together and push at the log. They heave at the log, and on the count of 3, they all push together. As for at the word go, the log went, and with it, Makan's philosophy, glory, and all. So at the word go, all the boys pushed together. The log gave way. Makan, who was sitting on the log, fell down, and Makan's philosophy of the futility of games went into the mud. All the other boys shouted themselves hoarse with delight. So all the boys became lost in the almost lost their voices, shouting with delight at what had happened. But Patik was a little frightened. He knew what was coming. Patik knows what will happen next. He knew what was coming enough. And sure enough, Makan rose from Mother Earth, blind as fate and screaming like the Furies. So Makan rose from the mud, Mother Earth, and he became furious, and he was screaming with his anger, and he was blind as fate at what he was going to do. He rushed at Patik and scratched his face and beat him and kicked him. So Makan becomes really furious. He charges at Patik and screaming, he scratches Patik's face and beat him and kicked him, and then went home crying. The first act of the drama was over. Patik wiped his face and sat down on the edge of a sunken barge on the riverbank. So there was a barge which had sunk, and the water had receded because it was low tide. Patik went down and sat down on the edge of the barge or boat and began to chew a piece of grass. A boat came up to the landing, and a middle-aged man with grey hair and dark moustache stepped on shore. So a boat comes up to the place where the passengers get off, and a middle-aged man with grey hair and dark moustache stepped on shore. He saw the boy sitting there doing nothing and asked him where the Chakravartis lived. Patik went on chewing the grass and said, "Over there." But it was quite impossible to tell where he pointed. So he points at a place where the Chakravartis were supposed to live, but it was impossible to know exactly where because he points in a general direction. The stranger asked him again. He swung his legs to and fro from the side of the barge and said, "Go and find out," and continued to chew the grass as before. But now a servant came down from the house and told Patik his mother wanted him. So a servant comes down from Patik's house and tells Patik his mother wanted to see him. Patik refused to move, but the servant was a master on the case. So Patik was stubborn. He doesn't want to go and see his mother because he knows his mother will be angry. But the servant was master. He knew what to do. He took Patik up roughly and carried him, kicking and struggling in impotent rage. So the servant picks up Patik bodily. Patik kicks and screams, and struggles in impotent rage means that his anger is quite without any result. When Patik came into the house, his mother saw him. She called out angrily, "So you've been hitting Makan again?" Patik answered indignantly, "No, I haven't. Who told you that?" His mother shouted, "Don't tell lies, you have." Patik said suddenly, "I tell you I haven't. You asked Makan." But Makan thought it best to stick to his previous statement. He said, "Yes, mother, Patik did hit me." So Makan has complained to his mother that Patik has hit him, and his mother has become furious. Patik's patience was already exhausted. He could not bear this injustice. So he knows that he hasn't hit Makan. Makan has lied, and his mother is has become angry because of Makan's lies. So Patik could not bear the injustice. He asked, he rushed at Makan and hammered him with blows. "Take that and that and that," for telling lies. So Patik hits him. His mother took Makan aside in a moment, pulled Patik away, beating him with her hands. When Patik pushed her aside, she shouted out, What? You little villain? Would you hit your own mother?" So Patik, in his anger, he hits out his own mother, and his mother becomes furious. It was just at this critical juncture the grey-haired stranger arrived. The stranger who'd stepped on the boat appeared at this critical moment. He asked what the matter was. Patik looked sheepish and ashamed. So Patik becomes very timid after his anger has been given expression. But when his mother stepped back and looked at the stranger, her anger was changed to surprise. For she recognized her brother and cried, "Why, Dada, where have you come from?" As she said these words, she bowed to the ground and touched his feet. Her brother had gone away soon after she had married, and he had started business in Bombay. His sister had lost her husband while he was in Bombay. So Patik and Makan, they don't have a father, and while their uncle was in Bombay, their father had died. Bishambar had now come back to Calcutta and had at once made inquiries about his sister. He had then hastened to see her as soon as he found out where she was. The next few days were full of rejoicing. The brother asked after the education of the two boys. He was told by his sister that Patik was a perpetual nuisance. Patik was endlessly a nuisance. He was lazy, disobedient, and wild. But Makan was as good as gold, as quiet as a lamb, and very fond of reading. Bishambar kindly offered to take Patik off his sister's hands and educate him with his own children in Calcutta. The widowed mother readily agreed. When his uncle asked Patik if he'd like to go to Calcutta with him, his joy knew no bounds. So Patik becomes extremely happy when he's going to leave his house and he's going to go to Calcutta. He said, "Oh yes, uncle," in a way that made it quite clear that he meant it. It was an immense relief to the mother to get rid of Patik. She had a prejudice against the boy, and no love was lost between the two brothers. So between Patik and Makan there was no sense of affection. She was in daily fear that he would either drown Makan someday in the river, or break his head in a fight, or run him into some danger or the other. So Patik's mother was afraid that Makan would get into some trouble because of Patik. At the same time, she was somewhat distressed to see Patik's extreme eagerness to get away. But so at the same time, Patik's mother was sad to see Patik so happy to get away from her. Patik, as soon as all was settled, kept asking his uncle every minute when they were to start. He was on pins and needles all day long with excitement. So he was very excited and lay awake most of the night. He bequeathed to Makan in perpetuity his fishing rod, his big kite, and his marbles. So he gave to Makan, he willed to Makan forever in perpetuity his belongings, his fishing rod, his big kite, and his marbles. Indeed, at the time of his departure, his generosity towards Makan was unbounded. So, because he was so glad of leaving, he gave Makan everything that he owned. When they reached Calcutta, Patik made the acquaintance of his aunt for the first time. She was by no means pleased with the unnecessary addition to the family. So Patik's aunt, that is Uncle Bishamba's wife, was not happy that Patik was coming into the family. She found her own three boys quite enough to manage without taking anyone else. So she found it quite hard to manage her own three children without taking on Patik in addition. And to bring a village lad of 14 into their midst was terribly upsetting. So to bring a village boy of 14 years was terribly upsetting. Bishambar should really have thought twice before committing such an indiscretion. So Uncle Bishambar should really have thought over the matter before committing such a mistake. In this world of human affairs, there was no worse nuisance than a boy at the age of 14. So, at the age of 14, boys are quite mischievous. He was neither ornamental nor useful. He was neither ornamental, that is, he was not a child who could be exhibited, nor was he useful because he was not old enough to work. That is a boy of 14. It is impossible to shower affection on him as a little boy, and he's always getting in the way. So, boy of 14 is always getting in the way. If he talks with childish lisp, with a childish lisp, he's called a baby, and if he answers as a grown up, he's called impertinent. So, if his voice breaks, he's called a baby, and if the 14-year-old boy answers in an adult manner, he's called impertinent or rude. He, in fact, any talk at all from him is resented. So he should not talk. A boy of 14 should not talk. He should keep quiet. Then he is and then he is at the unattractive growing age. So he's not yet a boy and he's not yet a man. So he's still growing. He grows out of his clothes with indecent haste. His voice grows hoarse and breaks and quavers. His face grows suddenly angular and unsightly. So all these physical features change. He is still unattractive. Grows out of his clothes very quickly. His voice becomes rough and breaks and quavers. Quavers means it goes up and down, and his face becomes angular and unsightly. It is easy to excuse the shortcomings of early childhood. It's hard to tolerate even unavoidable lapses in a boy of 14. So, easy to forgive a boy who's still a child, but it's hard to tolerate a growing up boy. The lad himself becomes painfully self conscious. When he talks with elderly people, he's either unduly forward or else so unduly shy that he appears ashamed of his very existence. So, a boy of 14 is still not an adult, and when he talks with his elders, he's either unduly oh, rude or else he's so shy that he seems to be sad at his very existence. Yet, it is at this very age when, in his heart of hearts, a young lad most craves for recognition of love, and he becomes the devoted slave of anyone who shows him consideration. So when he's 14, uh, a boy desires recognition and love, and when anyone shows him the least consideration, then he becomes their slave. But none dare openly love him, for he would be regarded as undue indulgence, and not and therefore bad for the boy. So no one dares to show him uh, undue love because that would spoil him. So what with scolding and chiding, he becomes very much like a stray dog that has lost his master. So a young boy of 14 who is treated like this, who is scolded and beaten, he becomes very much like a stray dog that has lost its master. For a boy of 14, his own home is the only paradise. So, his own home is a heaven for a boy of 14. To live in a strange house with strange people is a little short of torture, while at the height of his bliss is to receive the kind looks of women and never to be slighted by them. So, for a boy of 14, uh, it is a height of bliss, height of happiness to receive kind looks from a woman, and never be scolded by them. It was anguish to be the unwelcome guest in his aunt's house, despised by this elderly woman, and slighted on every occasion. So, on every occasion that presented itself, Patik's aunt would scold him and she would slight him, and so it became uh, thing of anguish or pain and torture. If she ever asked him to do anything for her, he would be so overjoyed that he would overdo it, and then she would tell him not to be so stupid but to get on with his lesson. So, whenever she asked him to do anything for her, he'd become extremely happy. He would do it to such a pitch of perfection that she would tell him not to overdo it and tell him to get on with his lessons. The cramped atmosphere of neglect in his aunt's house oppressed Patek so much that he felt he could hardly breathe. So he thought he couldn't stay in his aunt's house any longer. He could hardly breathe because he was so cramped, he was so contained and controlled in his aunt's house. He wanted to go out into the open country and fill his lungs and breathe freely with air. But there was no open country to go to. Surrounded on all sides by Calcutta houses and walls, he would dream night after night after his village home and long to be back there. He remembered the glorious meadow where he used to fly his kite all day long, the broad river banks where he would wander about the livelong day, singing and shouting for joy, the narrow brook where he could go and dive and swim at any time he liked. So he remembers his country house. He thought of his band of boy companions over whom he was despot, and above all the memory of that tyrant mother of his who had such a prejudice against him, occupied him day and night. So his mind becomes totally occupied with thoughts of his home, with thoughts of his band of boys, and with thoughts of his mother who was so cruel. A kind of physical love like that of animals, a longing to be in the presence of the one who is loved, an inexpressible wistfulness during absence, a silent cry of the inmost heart for the mother, like lowing of a cock in the twilight. This love, which was almost an animal instinct, agitated the shy, nervous, lean, uncouth, and ugly boy. So he remembers his home and a kind of physical love, like that. It's a longing to be in the presence of one who is loved, and he experiences an inexpressible feeling during his absence for his mother, like it's like the feeling of a calf in the evenings. So this love, which was almost an animal instinct, uh, animal of the shy need, lean, thin, uncouth, and ugly boy. No one could understand it, but it preyed upon him continually. There was no more backward boy in the whole school than Pratik. So there was no boy who was more dull than Pratik. He gaped and remained silent when the teacher asked him a question. Like an overlaid ass, patiently suffered all the blows that came down on his back. So he opened his mouth wide and stared at the teacher whenever the teacher asked him like a question. And when the teacher gave him blows on his back, he, he bore those blows like an overladen donkey or ass. When the other boys went out to play, he stood wistfully by the window and gazed at the roofs of the distant houses, and if by chance he spied children playing on the open terrace of any roof, his heart would ache with longing. So if he saw any children playing on the open terrace, his heart would ache with longing to play. One day he summoned up all his courage and asked his uncle, Uncle, when can I go home? His uncle answered, Wait till the holidays come. But the holidays would not come till November, and there was a long time still to wait. One day Patek lost his lesson book. Even with the help of books, he had found it very difficult indeed to prepare his lesson. Now it was impossible. Day after day, the teacher would come, cane him mercifully. So one day he lost his lesson book, and it became more difficult for him to prepare his lesson. And the teacher caned him unmercifully without mercy. His condition became so abjectly miserable that even his cousins were ashamed to own him. Then he began to jeer and they began to jeer and insult him more than the other boys. So even his own cousins, the three children of Bishambar, began to insult him. He went to his aunt at last and told her he had lost his book. His aunt pursed her lips in contempt and said, "You great clumsy country lout, how can I afford with all my family to buy a new book 5 times a month?" So she scolds him, she calls him a country bumpkin, and she asks him how he can afford to buy a new book 5 times a month. That night on his way back from school, Patik had a bad headache with a fit of shivering. He felt he was going to have an attack of malarial fever. His one great fear was that he would be a nuisance to his aunt. The next morning, Patik was nowhere to be seen. All searches in the neighborhood proved futile. The rain had been pouring in torrents all night, so it had been raining heavily all night, and Patik could not be found. And those who went out in search of the boys got drenched through to the skin. So those who went out in search of Patik became soaked to the skin in the rain. At last, Bishambar asked help from the police. At the end of the day, a policeman stopped at the door before the house. It was still raining and the streets were all flooded. Two constables brought out Patik in their arms and placed him before Bishambar. He was wet through from head to foot, muddy all over his eyes, his eyes flushed with fever and his limbs all trembling. So Patik had got caught in the rain and endured a high fever. And Bishambar carried him in his arms and took him to the inner apartments. When his wife saw him, she said, "What a heap of trouble this boy has given us. Hadn't you better send him home?" Patik heard her voice and sobbed out loud, "Uncle, I was just going home, but they dragged me back again." The fever rose very high, and all that night the boy was delirious. His mind becomes swimming, his mind swims with fever. He becomes delirious. Bishambar bought him a doctor. Patik opened his eyes, flashed with fever, and looked up to the ceiling and said vacantly, "Uncle, have the holidays come? May I go home?" Bishambar wiped the tears from his own eyes and took Patik's lean and burly hands in his own and sat by him through the night. The boy began to mutter. At last his voice became excited. "Mother," he cried, "don't beat me like that, mother, I'm telling you the truth." So in his mind, in his feverish mind, Patik is remembering his mother. The next day Patik became conscious for a short time. So he recovers his mind for a short time. He turned his eyes about the room as if expecting someone to come. At last, with an active air of disappointment, his head sank back on the pillow. He turned his face to the wall with a deep sigh. So, Bishambar knew his thoughts and bending down his head, whispered, "Patik, I sent for your mother." The day went by. The doctor said in a troubled voice that the boy's condition was very critical. Patik began to cry out, "By the mark, 3 fathoms, by the mark, 4 fathoms, by the mark." So what he's thinking of in his feverish brain is getting the depth of the river in his hometown. So fathom is a measure of the depth of the water of a river. Uh, Now he was himself plumbing an unfathomable sea. So Patik's mind has really become weak and he's remembering all the happiness that he had in his hometown. Later in the day, Patik's mother burst into the room like a whirlwind and began to toss from side to side and moan and cry in a loud voice. So that day later, Patik's mother came. She came in like a whirlwind, like a tornado, and began to sway from side to side and began to moan and cry in a loud voice because she was afraid for her son. Bishambar tried to calm her agitation, but she flung herself on the bed and cried, "Patik, my darling, my darling." Patik stopped his restless movement for a moment. His hand ceased beating up went down, said, "Hey." The mother cried again, "Patik, my darling, my darling." Patik very slowly turned his head, and without seeing anybody, "Mother, the holidays have come." So Patik regains his happiness when he hears his mother's voice, and he regains the sanity of his mind, and he recovers himself in the end. So we see how Patik uh, almost loses his mind because of the lack of love shown to him in his own aunt's house. But eventually he probably recovers and goes home to his village. Thank you. Hello, today we'll do Bonku Babu's Friend by Satyajit Ray. Satyajit Ray was a famous film director from Calcutta, and here he's written a story for children. So it says, no one had ever seen Bonku Babu get cross. To tell the truth, it was difficult to imagine what he might say or do if one day he did get angry. So Bonku Babu is the hero of the story, and he is a very calm individual. No one had ever seen him get cross, no one had ever seen him get angry. And it would be difficult to tell what he might say or do if one day he did get angry by chance. It was not as if there was never any reason for him to lose his temper. For the last 22 years, Bonku Babu had taught geography in Bengali at Kanakurgachi Village Primary School. Every year, a new batch of students replaced the old one. But old or new, the tradition of teasing poor Bonku Babu continued among all the students. So, uh, we're told that there were plenty of reasons why Bonku Babu should have got angry. For 22 years, Bonku Babu had taught the subjects of geography and Bengali at Kanakurgachi Village Primary School. So every year the students changed, but whether old students or new students, they all teased poor Bonku Babu. Some drew his cartoon on the blackboard, others put glue on his chair, or on the night of Kali Puja, they lit a chasing rocket and set it off right behind him. So, how did they tease Bonku Babu? Some drew his cartoon caricature on the blackboard. Some others put glue on his chair so that his clothes would stick. Or when there were fireworks, like during the time of Kali Puja, they lit a rocket and right behind him. Bonku Babu did not get upset by any of this. Only sometimes he cleared his throat and said, "Shame on you, boys." So he would never get angry, no matter what the students did. He would only clear his throat and say, "Shame on you, boys." One of the reasons for maintaining his calm was simply that he could not afford to do otherwise. If he did lose his temper and left his job in a fit of pique, he knew how difficult it would be to find another at his age. So, one of the reasons why he never got angry was because he could not afford to get angry. If he did lose his temper and he got angry and he left his job in a fit of irritation or pique, he knew how difficult it would be to get another at his age. Another reason was that in every class there were always a few good students, even if the rest of the class were full of pranksters. So, another reason was there were a few good students who listened to Bongo Babu and did what he said, took down his notes, and passed with high marks in the exams. There were always a few good students in every class, even if the rest of the class were full of pranksters, that is, those who made fun of Bongo Babu. Teaching this handful of good boys was so rewarding that to Bongo Babu, that alone made his life as a teacher worth living. So, teaching these few good boys made it all worthwhile for Bonku Babu. At times he invited those boys to his house, offered them snacks, and told them tales of foreign lands and exciting adventures. So he used to invite these good students to his house and he would give them snacks and he would tell them stories of foreign lands and exciting adventures. He told them about life in Africa, the discovery of the North Pole, the fish in Brazil that ate human flesh, and about Atlantis, the continent submerged under the sea. So, uh, to these good students, Bonko Babu narrated stories about life in Africa, in the jungles, how the North Pole was discovered, and about the fish in Brazil, that is a piranha that eat human flesh, and about Atlantis, the forgotten continent submerged under the sea. He was a good storyteller. He always had his audience enthralled. So he would always keep his audience's attention. They would always be spellbound by his narration of the events in the stories. So during the weekend, Bonko Babu went to the lawyer Sripati Majumdar's house to spend the evenings with other regulars. So on the weekends, on Saturdays and Sundays, Bonko Babu went to spend his free time at the lawyer Sripati Majumdar's house, and there were a few other regular attendees in these gatherings. On a number of occasions, he had come back thinking, enough, never again. The reason was simply that he could put up with the pranks played by the boys in his school, but when grown ups, even middle aged men, started playing the fool with him, it became too much to bear. So even the middle aged men who gathered in Sripati Majumdar's house on the weekend would tease Bonku Babu, and Bonku Babu would somehow bear the teasing of the boys in his school, but he could never bear the teasing of the middle aged men. At these addas that Sripati Babu hosted in the evenings, nearly everyone poked fun at Bonko Babu, sometimes bringing his endurance almost to breaking point. So, at these gatherings on the weekend, the regulars would tease Bonko Babu no end, and Bonko Babu would endure it until he felt he could bear it no longer. Only the other day, less than 2 months ago, they were talking about ghosts. Usually, Bonko Babu kept his mouth shut. That day, for some unknown reason, he opened it and declared he was not afraid of ghosts. That was all. So, usually Bonko Babu used to keep quiet in these gatherings, but one day when the topic of ghosts was mentioned, he just said, uh, he just said on the spur of the moment that he was not afraid of ghosts at all. But it was enough to offer a golden opportunity to the others. On his way back home later that night, Bonko Babu was attacked by a spook. As he was passing under a tamarind tree, a tall, thin figure leapt down and landed on his back. As it happened, this apparition had smeared black ink all over itself, possibly at the suggestion of someone at the meeting. So, when Bonko Babu mentioned that he was not afraid of ghosts, that was enough to make them tease him. On his way back home that night, someone in disguise as a ghost, as a spook, jumped down from a tamarind tree, and that spook or ghost had smeared black ink all over himself, and that was possibly the decision of someone at the meeting. Wonko Babu was not frightened, but he was injured. He was hurt. For 3 days, his neck ached. Worst of all, his new kurta was torn and it had black stains all over. What kind of joke was this? So his clothes were torn, but and his back was hurt and his neck was hurt. What kind of joke was this? Other jokes, less serious in nature, were often played on him. His umbrella or his shoes were often hidden, or else a pan would be filled with dirt instead of masala and handed over to him. So, in these gatherings on weekends, someone would hide his umbrella or his shoes, or else some pan, that is betel leaves, were filled with dirt, and that passed for masala, and that pan was handed over to him. or everyone would insist that Bonko Babu would be forced to sing, although he just couldn't. So someone would force Bonko Babu to sing. Even so, Bonko Babu had come to these meetings. If he didn't, what would Sripati Babu think? Not only was he a very important man in the school committee and in the village, but he couldn't do without Bonko Babu. So Sripati Majumdar was an important man in the village. That is why Bonko Babu attended the meetings. And Sripati Majumdar, the lawyer, depended on Bonko Babu. According to Sripati Majumdar, it was essential to have a butt of ridicule in the group who could provide amusement to all. So, just as there are many types of people in these gatherings, Bonku Babu was made the clown. He was supposed to be made fun of, and that would give them all entertainment. Uh, Otherwise, what was the point in having such get togethers? If no one could make fun of anyone else, what was the point of such get togethers? So Banku Babu was fetched, even if he tried to keep away. He tried to keep away, but he was fetched to the gatherings. On one particular day, the topic of conversation was space. In other words, they were talking of spaceships and space travel. Soon after sunset, a moving point of light had been seen in the northern sky. A similar light was seen 3 months ago, which had led to much speculation. So, people had seen a moving light in the northern sky, and that had caused much conversation, speculation. What could it be? Where did it come from? Is it an alien? In the end, it turned out to be a Russian satellite called Kotka, or was it Poshka? And in the end, they found out it was a Russian satellite. Anyway, this satellite was supposed to be going around the Earth at a height of 400 miles and providing a lot of valuable information to scientists. So, this satellite was on a data gathering mission. That particular evening, Bonku Babu was the first to spot the strange light. Then he called Nidhi Babu and showed it to him. However, when he arrived at the meeting, he found that Nidhi Babu had wholly claimed full credit for being the first person to see it and was boasting a great deal about it. Bonku Babu said nothing. No one in the group knew much about satellites, but that did not stop them from offering their views. Said Chandi Babu, "You can say what you like, but I don't think we should waste our time worrying about satellites. Somebody sees a point of light in some obscure corner of the sky, and the press gets all excited about it. So if someone sees a light in the sky, the newspapers are full of those stories, and they get all excited about it. Then we read a newspaper report saying how clever it all is, have a chat about it in our living rooms while casually chewing upon, and behave as if we had achieved something. All humbug." So these are the reactions to these lights in the sky. Ram Kanai countered this remark. He was still young. "No, it may not be of any of us here, but it is a human achievement surely, and a great achievement at that." So Ram Kanai said that sending satellites up into space was a great achievement, and it is not only the achievement of one person or one country, it is the achievement of mankind. Or come of it, well, of course it's a human achievement. Who'd build a satellite except man? You wouldn't expect a bunch of monkeys to do that, would you? So someone said, except for man, there's no other creature on earth who's capable of sending up a satellite. All right, said Nidhi Babu, let's not talk of satellites. After all, it's just a machine going around the earth, they say. No, not different from a spinning top. So a top would start spinning if you get it going, or a fan would start to rotate if you press the switch. A satellite's the same, but think of a rocket. That can't be dismissed so easily, can it? So Nidhi Babu compares the satellite to a spinning top and to a spinning fan, and he thinks that it's the same, going round and round the earth, rotating around the earth, just as a top or a fan. But when you think of a rocket, it's not so simple. That's what uh, uh, Nidhi Babu says. Chandi Babu wrinkled his nose. A rocket? Why, what good is a rocket? All right, if one was made here in a country to go from the Maidan in Calcutta and we could all go by and buy tickets to watch the show, well, then that would be nice. But Chandi Babu says, unless he was a spectator to see these rockets being shot into the sky from the Maidan in Calcutta, there was absolutely nothing of interest in a rocket. Chandi Babu, you're right, Ramkan, I agree. A rocket has no meaning for us here in this village. Bhairav Chakravarti spoke next. Suppose some creature from a different planet arrived on Earth. So what? Even if it did, you and I would never be able to see it. Yes, that's true enough. Everyone turned their attention to their cups of tea. So everyone starts drinking their tea silently. There did not seem to be anything left to be said. After a few moments of silence, Bonku Babu cleared his throat and said gently, suppose they came here. Suppose the aliens came here. Nidhi Babu feigned total amazement. Nidhi Babu pretended to be totally amazed. Hey, Bunkum wants to say something. Why? What did you say, Bunkum? Bunkum refers to Bonku Babu. What's going to come here? Who's going to come here? Where from? Bonku Babu repeated his words, his tone still gentle. Suppose someone from a different planet came here. As he did so often, Bhairav Chakravarti slapped Bonku Babu loudly and rudely, grinned and said, Bravo, what a thing to say. Where is a creature from another planet going to land? Not Moscow, not London, not New York, not even Calcutta, but here in Kanakarguchi. You do think big, Bunkum, don't you? So, Bhairav Chakravarti slaps Bonku Babu's back hard and he says, do you think an alien would land not in some important city of the world, but here in this obscure little village called Kankurgachi? Bonku Babu fell silent, but several questions rose in his mind. Was it really impossible for that an alien should land in their village? If an alien had to visit the earth, would it really matter if where it arrived first? So if an alien came, it really wouldn't matter where it came first. I might not aim to go straight to any other part of the. It might not aim to go straight to any other part of the world. All night it was highly unlikely that such a thing would happen in Kankurgachi village, but who was to say for sure that it could not happen at all? So uh, it is a possibility. It's not a certainty, but it's a possibility that an alien can come to that obscure little village of Kankurgachi. Sripati Babu was silent so far. Now, as he shifted in his seat, everyone looked at him. He put his cup down and spoke knowledgeably. Look, if someone from a different planet does come to Earth, I can assure you that he will not come to this godforsaken place. So, Sripati Babu is very well read and he tells the others, even if alien came from another planet, he will not land in Kankarguchi village, which is also been forsaken or forgotten by God Himself. Those aliens are no fools. It is my belief they are sahibs and they will land in some western country where all the sahibs live. Understand? So Sripati Majumdar says that these aliens are superior and they will land in some western country where all the superior men, the sahibs, live. Everyone agreed with the sole exception of Bonko Babu. Chandi Babu decided to take things a bit further. He touched Nidhi Babu, silently pointed at Bonko Babu and spoke innocently. Why, I think Bonko is quite right. Isn't it natural that aliens should want to come to a place where there is a man like our Bonko boy, Bonko Bihari? If they wanted to take away human specimen, could they find anything better? So, uh, Babu says that if the aliens decided to take a human back with them to examine humans, then they would find no better specimen than Bonku Bihari or Bonku Babu. No, I don't think so, Nidhi Babu joined in. Consider his looks, not to mention his brains. Yes, Bunkam would be the ideal specimen. So Bonku Babu's brains and his looks would make him an ideal candidate to be taken to be examined by the aliens. Right. Suitable for keeping in a museum or a zoo, Ram Kanai chipped in. Bonku Babu did not reply but wondered silently. If anyone were to actually look for a specimen, weren't the others just as suitable? So, Bonku Babu did not say anything, but he wonders silently whether any of the other people in that gathering were not suitable as himself. Look at Sripati Babu. His chin was so much like a camel's. And that Bhairav Chakravarti. His eyes were like the eyes of a tortoise. Nidhi Babu looked like a rat. Ram Kanai like a goat and Chandi Babu like a flittermouse. If a zoo really had to be filled up, then these people from Kanakargachi village would be ideal candidates to fill up the zoo. Tears sprang to his eyes. Bonku Babu had come to the meeting hoping for once to enjoy himself. That was clearly not to be. He could not stay here any longer. He got to his feet. Why, what's the matter, Bonku? Are you going to leave already? Sripati Babu asked, sounding concerned. Yes, it's getting late. Late? Pooh. It's not late at all. Anyway, tomorrow's holiday. Sit down. Have some more tea. No, thank you. I must go. I have some papers to correct. Namaskar. Take care, Bonku Dada. On Ramkana, it's a moonless night, remember, and it's a Saturday. Very auspicious for ghosts and spooks. Everyone howled with delighted laughter. So, uh, Bonku Babu saw the light when he was about halfway through the bamboo grove. So Bonku Babu, on his way back to his home, sees a light in the bamboo grove. Pon- Poncha Ghosh owned that entire area. Bonku Babu was not carrying any torch or a lantern. There was no need for it. It was too cold for snakes to be out and about, and he knew very well, as he knew very well, and he knew his way very well. So there was no need for a torch because it was too cold for the snakes to come out, and Bonku Babu knew the way back to his home from the lawyer's house very well. Normally, not many would take this route, but it meant a shortcut for him. In the last few minutes, he had become aware of something unusual. At first, he could not put his finger to it. So, in the last few moments, he was aware that something unusual was going on near the bamboo grove. At first, he could not guess what it was. Somehow, things were different tonight. What was wrong? What was missing? Suddenly, he realized what it was. The crickets were silent. So, the cricket insects were silent. They stopped their chirping. Not one was chirping. Usually, the cricket sounded louder as he moved deeper into the bamboo grove. Today there was only an eerie silence, so there was also a strange, ghostly silence in the bamboo grove. What had happened to all the crickets? Were they all asleep? Puzzled, Bonku Babu walked another 20 yards. Then he suddenly saw the light. At first he thought a fire had broken out. Bang in the middle of the bamboo grove, in the clearing near a small pond, quite a large area was glowing pink. A dull light shone on every branch and every leaf. Down below, the ground behind the pond was lit by a much stranger pink light. So there was a strange, ghostly pink light all over the bamboo grove, but it was not much stronger pink light. But was it not? But it was not a fire, for it was still. The light is very quiet, it's very still, and it's not a fire. Bonko Babu kept moving. All at once, his ears began ringing. So his ears began to hear bells. He felt as if someone was humming loudly, a long, steady noise. There was no way he could stop it. Wonka Babu broke out into goose pimples, so he becomes so scared and excited that he breaks out into goose pimples. But an irrepressible curiosity drove him further forward. So he becomes so curious that he cannot contain himself and he goes to see what that light is and what that noise is. As he went past a cluster of bamboo stems, an object came into view. As he passed a group of bamboo stems, something came into his view. It looked like a giant glass bowl turned upside down, covering the pond completely. It was through this translucent shade that a strong yet gentle pink light was shining out to turn the whole area radiant. So from that object, there was the whole area had become bright with a pink light. Not even in his wildest dreams had Bonko Babu witnessed such a strange scene. After staring at it for a few stunned minutes, he was stunned, so he stares at it for a few minutes. He realized that the object was still, it did not appear to be lifeless. It was still, but there were signs of life on it. There was an odd flicker, and the glass mound was rising and falling, exactly as one's chest heaves while breathing. So that round upturned glass bowl was going up and down. It's like someone breathing, his chest going up and down. He took a few steps to get a better look, but suddenly felt as if an electric current had passed through his whole body. In the next instant, he was rendered completely immobile. So suddenly he stunned into immobility. His hands and feet were tied with invisible rope. There was no strength left in his body. He could not move, neither backward nor forward. A few moments later, Bonko Babu, still fixed stiffly at the same spot, saw that the object gradually stopped breathing. So Bonko Babu is immobilized, but he is conscious and he sees that that object had stopped moving. All at once, his ears ceased ringing and the humming stopped. A second later, a voice spoke, shattering the silence of the night. It sounded human, but was extraordinarily thin. Milpi Ping Luke. Crook. Milpi Ping Crook, it said loudly. Bonko Babu jumped a little. What did it mean? What language was this? And where was the speaker? The next word the voice spoke made his heart jump again. Who are you? Who are you? Asked Bonko Babu. Why, these were English words. So the alien says, Who are you? Ask him, Who are you? And Bonko Babu is very surprised because they were English words. Was the question addressed to him? Bonko Babu swallowed. I am Bonko Bihari Datta, sir. Bonko Bihari Datta. Are you English? Are you English? The voice went on. No, sir, Bonko Babu shouted back. Bengali, sir. Bengali Kayasta. This was followed by a short pause, and the voice came back speaking clearly. Namaskar. Bonko Babu heaved a sigh of relief and returned the greeting. Namaskar. He said, suddenly realizing that the invisible bonds were holding him tightly had disappeared. So he becomes free again. He was free to run away, but he did not. Now he is astounded. Now his surprised eyes could see that a portion of the glass mound was sliding to one side, opening out like a door. Through that door emerged a head like a plain, smooth ball, and then the body of a weird creature. Its arms and legs were amazingly thin, with the exception of its head. Its whole body was covered by a shiny pink outfit. Instead of ears, it had tiny holes on each side of his head. On the face were two holes where there should have been a nose, and another gaping hole instead of a mouth. There was no sign of hair anywhere. Its eyes were round and bright yellow. They appeared to be glowing in the dark. The creature walked slowly towards Bonko Babu and stopped only a few feet away. So this is an alien creature which has come, and that has been described by the, and that has been described. Then it gave him a steady, unblinking stare. Automatically, Bonko Babu found himself folding his hands. So as the alien looks at him, Bonko Babu automatically folds his hands in a namaskar. Having stared at him for nearly a minute, it spoke in the same voice that sounded more like a flute than anything else. Are you human? So the alien's voice sounded like the music of the flute. Are you human? It asked. Yes. Is this Earth? Yes. I thought as much. My instruments are not working properly. I was supposed to go to Pluto. I wasn't sure where I had landed, so I spoke to you first in the language they use on Pluto. When you didn't reply, I could tell I had landed on Earth. A complete waste of time and effort. So, landing on Earth is a complete waste of time and effort, according to the alien. It happened once before. Instead of going to Mars, I veered off and went to Jupiter. Delayed me by a whole day, it did. Bonko Babu did not know what to say. He was feeling quite uncomfortable, for the creature had reached out and was pressing Bonko Babu's arms and legs with its long bony fingers. When it finished, it introduced itself. I am Ang, from the planet Kranios, a far superior being than man. What? This creature, barely 4 feet tall with such thin limbs and weird flesh, was superior to man? Bonko Babu nearly burst out laughing. So I can't believe that something so thin and weak would be superior to man's physical strength. Bonko Babu at any Ang read his mind immediately. There's no need to be skeptical, I can prove it. How many languages do you know? Bonko Babu scratched his head. Bengali, English, and Hindi, a little Hindi, I mean. You mean two and a half? Yes. I know 14,000. There isn't a single language in your solar system that I do not know. I also know 31 languages spoken on planets outside your system. I have been to 25 of them. How old are you? I am 50, says Bonko Babu. I am 833, says the alien. Do you eat animals? Bonko Babu had had mutton curry only recently on the day of Kali Puja. How could he deny it? We stopped eating meat several centuries ago, Ang informed him. Before that, we used to eat the flesh of most creatures. I might also have eaten you. Bonko Babu swallowed hard because this was unexpectedly difficult for him to hear. Take a look at this. Ang offered him a small object. It looked like a pebble. Bonko Babu touched it for an instant, felt the same electric current pass through his body. He withdrew his hand at once. Ang smiled. A little while ago you could not move an inch. Do you know why? Only because I had this little thing in my hand. It would stop anyone from getting closer. Nothing can be more effective than this in making an enemy utterly powerless without actually hurting him physically. So that thing that the alien has in his hand will immobilize an enemy, but it won't hurt him physically. Now Banko Babu was genuinely taken aback. His mind was coming out of its stunned state. Ang said, is there any place that you have wished to visit or seen that you have longed to see but never could? Bongo Babu thought why the whole world remained to be seen. He taught geography, but what had he seen except a few villages and towns in Bengal? There was so much in Bengal itself that he had never had the chance to see. The snow capped Himalayas, the seashore in the Diga, the forest in the Sundarbans, or even the famous banyan tree in the botanical gardens at Shibyar. So there are a lot of things that Bonko Babu hadn't seen, and when the alien asked him, did he wish to see anything, Bonko Babu thinks of these things. However, he mentioned one of these thoughts to Am. There is so much I'd like to see, finally admitted, but most of all, I think I'd like to visit the North Pole. I come from a warm country, you see. Ang took out a small tube, one end of which was covered by a piece of glass. Take a look through this, Ang invited. Bonko Babu peered through the glass, felt all his hair rise. Could this be true? Could he really believe his eyes? Before him stretched an endless expanse of snow, dotted with large hillocks also covered with ice and snow. Above him, against the deep blue sky, all the colors of a rainbow were forming different patterns, changing every second. The aurora borealis. What was that? An igloo? There was a group of polar bears. Was there another animal? A strange, peculiar creature. Yes, it was a walrus. There were two of them, in fact, and they were fighting. Their tusks bared, large as radishes, and they were attacking each other. Streams of bright red blood were flowing on the soft white snow. It was December, and Bonko Babu was looking at an area hidden under a layer of snow. Still, he broke out in a sweat. What about Brazil? Don't you wish to go there? Asked Ram. Bonko Babu remembered him instantly. Piranhas, those deadly carnivorous fish, those deadly meat eating fish. Amazing. How did this Ang know what he would like to see? Bonko Babu peered through the tube again. He could see the dense forest. Only a little scattered sunlight had crept in through the almost impenetrable foliage. There was a huge tree, and hanging from a branch, what was that? Oh God! He could never even have imagined the size of that snake. Anaconda. The name flashed through his mind. Yes, he had read about it in an old issue of the National Geographic magazine. It was said to be much, much larger than a python. Where was the fish? Oh, here was a canal. Crocodiles lined its banks, sleeping in the sun. One of them moved. It was going into to go into the water. Splash. Bonko Babu could almost hear the noise. But what was that? The crocodile had jumped out of the water very quickly. Was Could it be that the same one that went in only a few, with his eyes nearly popping out? Bonko Babu noted that there was virtually no flesh left on the belly of the crocodile. Bones were showing clearly. So the belly of the crocodile had been eaten away by the piranhas in the water. Attached to this remaining flesh were five fish with amazingly sharp teeth and monstrous appetite. Piranhas. Bonko Babu could not bear to watch any more. His limbs were trembling, his head reeled painfully. Now do you believe that we are superior? Ang wanted to know. Bonko Babu ran his tongue over his parched lips. Yes, oh yes, certainly, of course, he croaked. So he's lost his voice, and he agrees that the aliens are superior. Very well, look, I've been observing you and I've examined your arms and legs. You belong to a much inferior species. There is no doubt about that. However, as human beings go, you're not bad. I mean, you're a good man, but you have a major fault. You're much too meek and mild. That is why you made so little progress in life. You must always speak up against injustice and protest if anyone hurts you or insults you without any provocation. Uh, to take things quietly is wrong, not just for man, but for any creature anyway. Anyway, it was nice to have met you, although I wasn't really supposed to be here at this time. There's no point in wasting more time on your earth. I'd better go. Goodbye, Mr. Ong. I'm glad to have made your acquaintance, says Bonku Babu. Bonku Babu could not complete his sentence. In less than a second, almost before he could grasp what was happening, almost before he could understand what was happening, Ang had leapt into his spaceship and risen over Panchagosha's bamboo grove. Then he vanished completely. Bonku Babu realized that the crickets had started chirping again. It was really quite late. Bonku Babu resumed walking towards his home, his mind still in a wondrous haze. So, slowly, the full implications of the recent events began to sink in. A man. No, it was not a man, it was an Ang, come here from some unknown planet. Who knew if anyone had heard its name spoken to him? How extraordinary, how completely incredible. There were billions and billions of people in the world, but who got the chance to have this wonderful experience? Bonku Bihari Datta, teacher of geography and Bengali in the Kanagurgachi village primary school. No one else had had that experience. From today, at least, in the particular matter, he was unique in the whole wide world. Bonku Babu realized he was no longer walking with a spring in every step, he was actually dancing. The next day was a Sunday. Everyone had turned up for the usual meeting at Sripati Babu's house. There was a report in the local paper about a strange light, but it was only a small report. The light had been seen by a handful of people in the only two places in Bengal. It was therefore being put in the same category as sightings of flying saucers. Flying saucers are alien ships. Tonight, Poncha Ghosh was also present at the meeting. He was talking about his bamboo grove. All the bamboo around the pond in the middle of the wood had lost their leaves. It was not unusual for leaves to drop off in water in winter, but for so many plants to become totally bare overnight was certainly a remarkable occurrence. Everyone was talking about it when suddenly Bhairav Chakravarti said, "Why is Bonku Babu so late today?" Everyone stopped talking. So far, no one had noticed Bonku Babu's absence. I don't think Bankam would show his face here today. Didn't he get an earful yesterday when he tried to open his mouth, said Nindi Babu. No, 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 Sripati Babu sounded. He must have Bonku Ramkanai. Ramkanai, go and see if he can get hold of him. Okay, I'll go as soon as I've had my tea, replied Ramkanai, and was about to take a sip when Bonku Babu entered the room. No, to say entered would be wrong. It was as if a small hurricane swept inside in the guise of a short, dark man, throwing everyone into stun sight. So Bonku Babu rushes into the room. Then it swung into action. Bonku Babu burst into a guffaw and laughed uproariously for a whole minute, the like of which no one had heard before. So Bonku Babu laughs at the top of his voice. Huh? When he could finally stop, he cleared his throat and began speaking. Friends, I have great pleasure in telling you that this is the last time you'll see me at your meetings. The only reason I'm here today is simply I would like to tell you a few truths before I go. Number one is all for all of you. You all speak a great deal of absolute rubbish. Only idiots talk of things they don't know anything about. Number two, this is for Chandi Babu at your age. Hiding other people's shoes and umbrellas is not just childish, but usually totally stupid and wrong. Kindly return my umbrella and brown canvas shoes to my house tomorrow. Nidhi Babu, if you call me Bunkam, I shall call you Nitwit. And you must learn to live with that. And Sripati Babu, you are an important man, of course. You must have chamchas, sycophants, that is, flatterers. But let me tell you from today, you can count me out. If you like, I can send my cat to you. It's quite good at licking feet. And oh, you're here as well, Poncha Babu. Let me inform you and everyone else that last night an Ang arrived from the planet Cranios and landed on the pond in your bamboo grove. We had a long chat. The Ang was most amiable, was very friendly. Bonku Babu finished his speech and slapped Bhairav Chakravarti's back so hard that he choked. Then he made his exit, striding out with a bounce and a whistle, his eyes sparkling, his head held high. In the same instant, the cup fell down from Ramkanai's hand. shattering into pieces and splattering hot tea on most of the others. So that is the end of Bonko Babu's friend. And Bonko Babu regains his confidence in life. Hello, today I will do The Model Millionaire by Oscar Wilde. So it says, unless one is wealthy, there is no use in being a charming fellow. So a person may have all the charm in the world, but unless he has wealth, there is no use. Romance is the privilege of the rich, not the profession of the unemployed. So, romance, love between two people, man and a woman, is a privilege of the rich. Only the rich can afford to be romantic. It should not be the profession of the unemployed, those who do not have an income. The poor should be practical and prosaic. So the poor should look after their accounts. They should look after their budget. They should be practical in allocating every penny to its proper purpose. And they should be prosaic. They should not be poetic. So they should be routine. Their life should be routine. They should be very, you know, following a path. So they should be prosaic. It is better to have a permanent income than to be fascinating. So, because uh, on money is dependent so many things like food, like shelter, like clothing, the three basic necessities, it is better to have a permanent income than to be fascinating. You may hold the attention of many people for a long time, but unless you have a good source of income, all these charms and all these fascinations which one holds for others is of no use. These are the great truths of modern life which Huey Erskine never realized. So, Huey Erskine is the hero of the story, and he had never realized the importance of these great truths. So, he was never practical, he was unemployed, and but he was charming. Poor Huey. Intellectually, we must admit he was not of much importance. So, Huey was not exactly a genius. He was not of much importance intellectually. He never said a brilliant nor even an ill natured thing in his life. He had never made a proverbial statement. He had never made a brilliant statement. He had never even made and said an ill natured. He was never angry with anyone. But then he was wonderfully good looking with his crisp brown hair, his clear cut profile, and his grey eyes. So he was a very good looking man, and he had brown hair, which was crisp, and he had a clear cut profile and grey eyes. He was as popular with men as he was with women, and he had every accomplishment except that of making money. So he had all the qualities required to be a gentleman, except he didn't know how to make money. His father had bequeathed him his cavalry sword and a history of the Peninsular War in 15 volumes. So when his father had passed away, he had willed Huey, his son, his cavalry sword. His father had been an officer in the army and he was in the cavalry. The cavalry is the part of the army which rides on horseback. So given him, he had bequeathed him, he had willed him his cavalry sword and a book called The History of the Peninsular War in 15 volumes. Huey hung the first over his looking glass, put the second on a shelf between Ruff's Guide and Bailey's magazine, and lived on 200 a year that an old aunt allowed him. So Huey hung the cavalry sword over his mirror. Then he put the history of the Peninsular War in 15 volumes between a magazine called Ruff's Guide and Bailey's magazine, and his only source of income was £200 a year that an old aunt allowed him. He had tried everything. He had gone on the stock exchange for 6 months. So he had tried to trade in stocks and shares for 6 months. But what was a butterfly to do among bulls and bears? So what could a butterfly, a very sensitive man, do among bulls and bears? Bulls and bears means that is a description of the stock market. The stock market can either be bullish or bearish. If it's bullish, people sell the stocks because they're at a high price, and if it's bearish, they buy the stocks because they're at a low price. So bullish and bearish. What was a butterfly like Huey to do among bulls and bears? He had been a tea merchant for a little longer, but had soon tired of Pico and Souchong. So he tried selling tea. Tea is a very popular drink in London, where the story is set. So he tried to be a tea merchant for say 6 months, for a little longer, but he had soon tired of teas like Pico and Souchong. Then he tried selling dry sherry. Dry sherry is a type of wine, and he tried selling dry sherry for a little longer. That did not answer. The sherry was a little too dry. Ultimately, he became nothing, a delightful, ineffectual young man with a perfect profile and no profession. So, to make matters worse, he was in love. The girl he loved was Laura Merton, the daughter of a retired colonel who had lost his temper and his digestion in India and had never found either of them again. So, uh, what makes it even more complicated is the fact that Huey is head over heels in love with Laura Merton. So, Laura Merton was the daughter of a retired colonel in the army. The colonel had been posted in India, and in India he had lost his temper because he was always angry with the natives, and then because he always had to eat curry and things like that, native foods of India, he had also lost his digestion, and he had never found either his temper or his digestion again. Laura adored him, and he was ready to kiss her shoestrings. So Laura Merton adored Huey. She had also fallen in love with Huey, and she was ready to kiss his shoestrings. They were the handsomest couple in London and had not a penny piece between them. So they were the most handsome couple in all of London, but they did not have any money between them. The colonel was very fond of Huey, but would not hear of any engagement. So the colonel, Laura's father, was very fond of Huey, but he would not hear of any engagement or marriage between his daughter and Huey. Come to me, my boy, when you have got 10,000 pounds of your own, and we'll see about it. So Laura's father insists that Huey has a source of income, 10,000 pounds. Then he would see if he could get Laura and Huey married. And Huey looked very glum in those days and had to go to Laura for consolation. So Huey used to become very sad, and he used to uh, go to Laura, and Laura would console him. She'd say, "It's okay, Huey, you'll do something. You'll finally make something of yourself." She used to console him like that. One morning, as he was on his way to Holland Park, where the Mertons lived, he dropped in to see a great friend of his, Alan Trevor. So Holland Park is a part in London where Laura Merton and her father lived. And he dropped in to see a great friend of his, Alan Trevor. Trevor was a painter. Indeed, few people escape that nowadays. So many people in those days used to take to art. They used to become painters, poets, sculptors, and authors. So few people could escape being artists in those days. He was not only a painter, he was also an artist, and artists are rather rare. So there's a difference between a painter and an artist. A painter is one who merely reproduces on canvas whatever he sees. He paints an exact picture. He paints an exact painting of what he sees. It can be a tree, or it can be a flower, or it can be a person. But an artist puts his own input into the painting and it stands out from an ordinary painting. So, you were, Alan Trevor was also an artist, and artists are rather rare. Personally, he was a strange, rough fellow with a freckled face and a red, ragged beard. So Alan Trevor had red hair, and he was rough. He looked rough, and he had a freckled face. Freckled face means they're like spots. They're not pimples. They're not spots, but they are inside the skin. He had a freckled face and a red, rough beard, ragged beard. However, when he took up the brush, he was a real master, and his pictures were eagerly sought after. However, when Alan Trevor took up his paintbrush, he was a real master of painting, and all his paintings were eagerly sought. He had been very much attracted by Huey at first, it must be acknowledged, entirely on account of his personal charm. So, Alan Trevor was attracted to Huey because of his personal charm. The only people a painter should know, he used to say, are people who are beautiful, people who are an artistic pleasure to look at, and an intellectual repose to talk to. So, Alan Trevor had a saying, he said, the only people a painter should know are people who are beautiful, people who are an artistic pleasure to look at, that is, the features are very fine and appealing, and those people who are an intellectual repose to talk to. So, people who are beautiful, people who are appealing, and who have intelligence. So, you can talk to them, and they would eagerly, or at least sympathetically respond to all your talk. Men who are dandies and women who are darlings rule the world. At least they should do so. Men who are dandies. A dandy is one who dresses up. Men who are dandies and women who are darlings rule the world, or at least they should do so. So, according to Trevor, the world should be ruled by beautiful people. At least that's how it should be. However, after they got to know Huey better, he liked him quite as much for his bright, buoyant spirits and his generous, reckless nature, and had given him the permanent entry to his studio. After he got to know Huey a little better, Alan Trevor liked Huey for his buoyant. He was uh, very irrepressible happiness, as well as his generous, reckless nature. So Huey had a generous nature. He used to dispense money whenever he had it, and Trevor liked him for this, and he had given him permanent entrance to his studio. When Huey came in, he found Trevor putting the finishing touches to a wonderful life-size picture of a beggar man. The beggar himself was standing on a raised platform in a corner of the studio. He was a wizened, he was a dried up old man with a face like wrinkled parchment, like dry paper, parchment is paper, and a most piteous expression. When Huey came in, uh, Alan Trevor was painting a life size picture of an old beggar. Over his shoulders was flung a coarse brown cloak, all tears and tatters. His thick boots were patched and cobbled, and with one hand he leant on a rough stick, while with the other he held out his battered hat for arms. So over the shoulders of this model beggar, there was a coarse, a rough brown cloak, and all this cloak was all torn and tattered, and he had thick boots, which were torn, but they had been patched with pieces of leather, and they had been sewn. And with one hand, he leaned on a rough stick, while with the other he held out his battered hat, his beaten up hat or arms. He was asking for money by holding out his hat. What an amazing model, whispered Huey as he shook hands with his friend. An amazing model, shouted Trevor at the top of his voice. I should think so. Such beggars as he are not to be met with every day. A true Monsieur, a living Velasquez. So, my stars, what an etching Rembrandt would have made of him. So, Rembrandt is an artist, he was a painter, and Rembrandt would have made a great etching. Etching is, when you make it on a piece of metal. So Rembrandt would have made a great etching of the of that beggar. But Alan Trevor says such beggars are not to be met with every day. Poor old chap, said he, how miserable he looks. But I suppose to you painters his face is his fortune. So Huey sympathizes with the beggar. He says he looks miserable, but to a painter like Alan Trevor, the beggar's face is his fortune because Alan Trevor will get a lot of money for the painting he's going to make of the beggar. Certainly, you don't want a beggar to look happy, do you? How much does the model get for sitting? Asked Huey, as he found himself a comfortable seat on the divan. A shilling an hour. And how much do you get for your picture, Alan? Oh, for this, I get 2,000. Pounds? Guineas. Guineas are gold coins. Painters, poets, and physicians always get guineas. Well, I think the model should have a percentage, cried Huey, laughing. They work quite as hard as you do. So the beggar has to stand still for hours in that pose, and Alan Trevor also works equally hard. So Huey thinks that the beggar should get a percentage of the 2,000 guineas or gold coins. Nonsense, nonsense. Why, look at the trouble of laying on the paint alone and standing all day long at one's easel. An easel is the instrument on which the canvas is put. So you have to stand all day long at the easel and lay on the colors exactly. It's all very well, Huey, for you to talk, but I assure you that there are moments when art almost attains to the dignity of manual labor. So, art may be very appealing and very aesthetically it may be beautiful, but Alan Trevor says, that art almost attains to the dignity of manual labor. Just as a manual laborer has to dig in the ground, art becomes equally strenuous. But you mustn't chatter. I'm very busy. Smoke a cigarette and keep quiet. After some time, the servant came in and told Trevor that the frame maker wanted to speak to him. So the servant of Alan Trevor came in a bit later and told Alan Trevor that the frame maker for the painting wanted to speak to him. Don't run away, Huey, she said as he went out. I'll be back in a moment. The old beggar took advantage of Trevor's absence to sit for a moment on a wooden bench that was behind him. He looked so forlorn and wretched that Huey could not help pitying him. The beggar looked so lonely and so wretched, so feels so bad that Huey pities him. He felt in his pockets to see what money he had. All he could find was a sovereign. Sovereign is also a very like 10 pounds, like a coin, gold coin, and some coppers. Poor old fellow, he thought to himself, he wants it more than I do, but it means no hansoms for a fortnight. So Huey thinks of giving them his money, a sovereign and a few coppers, to the old beggar, but it means that he'll have to walk. There won't be any hansoms for him. There won't be any carriages for him for a fortnight, for 2 weeks. As he walked across to the studio and slipped the sovereign into the beggar's hand, the old man was startled. He was shocked, but a faint smile flitted across his withered lips. Thank you, sir, he said. Thank you. So, uh, the old man was shocked, but nevertheless he smiles faintly and his dry lips. He has dry lips and says thank you to Huey. Then Trevor arrived and Huey took his leave, blushing a little at what he had done. So Huey is a bit embarrassed at what he had done because he's given away all his money. He spent the day with Laura, got a charming scolding for his extravagance, and had to walk home. So Laura scolds him in a charming way when he tells her what he has done, and he had to walk home because he could not afford the carriage. That night he strolled into the Palette Club about 11 o'clock and found Trevor sitting by himself in the smoking room and drinking hock and seltzer. So that night he walked into the Palette Club. So that is a club in London where artists congregate. He went there at 11 o'clock and he found Alan Trevor sitting by himself drinking Hock and seltzers. Hock and seltzers is like a fizzy drink. Well, Alan, did you get the picture finished all right? He said as he lit a cigarette. Finished and framed, my boy. And by the by, you made a conquest. That old model you saw is quite devoted to you. I had to tell him all about you, who you are, where you live, and what your income is, what prospects you have. So Alan Trevor had told the old beggar everything he knew about Huey's life. So Huey is shocked. My dear Alan, I shall probably find him waiting for me when I go home. So Huey says that, the beggar will probably be waiting for him when Huey returns home. But of course, you're only joking. Poor old wretch. I wish I could do something for him. I think it is dreadful that anyone should be so miserable. I have got heaps of old clothes at home. Do you think he'd care for any of them? Why his rags were falling to bits? But he looks splendid in them, said Trevor. I wouldn't paint him in a frock coat for anything. Frock coat is a uh, tailcoat, like, okay. What you call rags, I call romance. What seems to be poverty to you is picturesque to me. However, I'll tell him of your offer. So, Trevor says, what Huey calls rags, that is old torn clothes, to Trevor it is romance because once the painting is done, everybody will find it appealing. What seems poverty to you is picturesqueness to me. So it's like a landscape. So it's very appealing. However, I'll tell him of your offer. Alan said Huey seriously, you painters are a heartless lot. So Huey says to Alan, you painters don't have any sympathy for anybody. An artist's heart is his head, replied Trevor. And besides, our business is to realize the world as we see it, not to reform it as we know it. So the business of a painter is to reproduce whatever part of the world he's painting. It's not to reform the world. So if he has to paint a beggar, then he has to make an exact painting of the beggar. He has to reproduce whatever he sees on canvas very faithfully. It's not to reform the world, it's not to change the world, it is not to make the poor rich or to uplift society. That is not the business of an artist. A Chacon's and Mentia. And now tell me how Laura is. The old model was quite interested in her. You don't mean to say you talked to him about her? So Alan Trevor has talked to the old beggar model about Laura Merton. Certainly I did. He knows all about the relentless Colonel, the lovely Laura, and the 10,000 pounds. So the old beggar knows everything that there is to know about Huey's love life also. He told that old beggar all my private affairs, cried Huey, looking very red and angry. My dear boy, said Trevor smiling, that old beggar, as you call him, is one of the richest men in Europe. He could buy all London tomorrow without overdrawing his account. He has a house in every capital, dines of gold plate, and can prevent Russia going to war when he chooses. So Trevor lets you in on a secret. The beggar man he was painting is not really a beggar at all, but is one of the richest men in the world. He had only he had only worn those clothes to make it to maybe he felt it's a bit sarcastic and maybe he wanted to be humble and paint himself as a beggar, but that man whom Alan Trevor had painted could buy all of London the next day without overdrawing his account. And he had a house in every capital city of the world. He dined off gold plate and could prevent Russia from going to war when he chooses. What on earth do you mean? Exclaimed Huey. What I say, the old man you saw today in the studio was Baron Horsberg. He is a great friend of mine, buys all my pictures and that sort of thing, and gave me a commission a month ago to paint him as a beggar. Qui voulez-vous, la fante du millionaire. And I must say, he made a magnificent figure in his rags. Rags are torn clothes, or perhaps I should say in my rags, they're an old suit I got in Spain. So the old Baron Horsberg had worn Alan Trevor's old clothes, the clothes he had got in Spain. Baron Horsburgh, good heavens. I gave him a sovereign and he sank into an armchair, the picture of dismay. So he's given one of the richest men in all the world. He had given him a sovereign, he given him a gold coin, and this is the height of his irony. Gave him a sovereign, shouted Trevor, and he burst into a roar of water and laughter. My dear boy, you'll never see it again. I think you might have told me, Alan, said Hughie sulkily, and not have let me make such a fool of myself. So imagine giving money to one of the richest men in all Europe, all the world. Well, to begin with, Hughie, said Trevor, it never entered my mind that you went about distributing arms in that reckless way. So Alan Trevor says that it. Uh, uh, he never thought that Huey would go about distributing money in that reckless way. Huey himself is in want, so he didn't think that he'd go about distributing money in that reckless, that is, without thinking way. I can understand you kissing a pretty model, but you're giving a sovereign to an ugly one. By Jove, no. He couldn't understand how Huey could bring himself to give money to an ugly model like Baron was. Besides, the fact is, I really was not at home today to anyone, and when you came in, I didn't know whether Horsburgh would like his name mentioned. You know he wasn't in full dress. So, on that day when he was painting Baron Horsburgh, uh, Alan Trevor had informed his servant to tell everyone that he was not at home because he was busy painting the Baron. And when Huey came in, because he had permanent entree to his studio, Alan didn't know whether he would want Baron Horsburgh to be mentioned by name because his clothes were in rags. What a duffer he must think me, said Huey. Not at all. He was in the highest spirits after he left, kept chuckling, kept laughing to himself and rubbing his old wrinkled hands together. I couldn't make out why he was so interested to know all about you. But I see it all now. He'll invest your sovereign for you. He will pay you the interest every 6 months. And I have a capital story to tell after dinner. So he'll invest his sovereign, pay interest on the sovereign every 6 months, and have a story, after dinner story, to tell all his friends. Uh, I'm an unlucky devil, growled Huey. The best thing I can do is go to bed, and my dear Alan, you mustn't tell anyone. I shouldn't dare show my face in the robe. So Huey asked Alan not to tell anyone. He wouldn't want to show his face to anyone again if the story had got about that he'd given a sovereign to one of the richest men in the world. Nonsense. It reflects the highest credit on your philanthropic spirit, Huey. So Alan Trevor says that Huey is a philanthropist, and don't run away, have another cigarette, and you can talk about Laura as much as you like. However, Huey wouldn't stop but walked home, feeling very unhappy and leaving Alan Trevor in fits of laughter. The next morning, as he was at breakfast, the servant brought him up a card on which was written, Monsieur Gustave Nodin, on the part of Madame Le Baron Horsburgh. So Monsieur Gustave Nodin has come to visit Huey, and he is a representative of Monsieur Le Baron Horsburgh. I suppose he has come for an apology, said Huey to himself. He told the servant to show the visitor up. An old gentleman with gold spectacles and grey hair came into the room and said in a slight French accent, Have I the honor of addressing Monsieur Erskine? Huey bowed. I have come from Baron Horsburgh, he continued. The Baron. I beg, sir, that you will offer him my sincerest apologies, stammered Huey. The Baron, said the old gentleman with a smile, has commissioned me to bring you this letter, and he extended a sealed envelope towards Huey. On the outside was written, a wedding present to Huey Erskine and Laura Burton from an old beggar, and inside was a cheque for £10,000. When they were married, Alan Trevor was the best man, and the Baron made a speech at the wedding breakfast. Millionaire models, remarked Alan, are rare enough. But by Jove, model millionaires are rarer still. So, a millionaire who poses as a beggar, who models as a beggar, are rare, says Alan Trevor. But millionaires who are models, of philanthropy, of generosity are rarer still, remarked Alan Trevor at the wedding, the end. Hello, today we'll do the poem, a work of artifice by the poet Marge Piercy. So, artifice means artificial, that is man made. So, anything that is man made is a work of artifice or artificial. So, what is this artificial thing, man made thing? We're told the bonsai tree in the attractive pot could have grown 80 feet tall on the side of a mountain till split by lightning. So, bonsai is a form of Japanese gardening wherein the gardener he prunes what is called the taproot. The taproot is a central root from which all the other roots of the tree branch out, and the tree's roots they spread to a very large, very wide area from the tree. So, if the taproot, that is a central root of the tree, is removed, then the growth of the tree will be limited. It won't grow to its full height. So, this is the bonsai tree in the attractive pot. So, it's placed in an attractive pot. It could have grown to 80 feet tall. The height of the tree could have been 80 feet, and it could have been growing on the side of a mountain till in a storm the lightning would split it, because lightning is always attracted to the highest point uh, on the ground. So the tree which is growing in a small pot, which has been pruned, which has been made smaller by man, could have grown to its full majestic height in the middle of nature. But a gardener carefully pruned it. So the gardener carefully cut the taproot and pruned it. So if you cut off a branch or if you cut off a part of a plant, it's called pruning it. It is 9 inches high. So without the taproot, the height of the tree is only 9 inches. Every day, as he whittles back the branches, the gardener croons, "It is your nature to be small and cozy, domestic and weak." So every day, as he removes the dead leaves, as he breaks off the old branches of the bonsai tree, as he whittles down the branches of the bonsai, the gardener sings to the tree that it is the nature of the tree to be small and cozy, small and comfortable, domestic and weak. So, how lucky, little tree, to have a pot to grow in. So, perhaps here the poet is thinking about women. Maybe it is about how women's nature is, the nature is to be small, comfortable, domestic, and they are physically weak. So it would be uh, lucky for them to find shelter. Here, perhaps the poet is speaking from a feministic point of view. With living creatures, one must begin very early to dwarf their growth. The bound feet, the crippled brain, the hair in curlers, the hands you love to touch. So, with living creatures like the tree, one must begin very early to dwarf their growth. So, whether it's women or whether it's children, people must begin to control, to discipline them, because uh, they discipline them uh, by limiting their movements, by limiting their brain, the knowledge they get, and they decorate their hair with curlers because they love to be with the children, they love to be with their their offspring. So, just as the bonsai is pruned, just as the bonsai is kept artificially kept from reaching its full height, so in society, people have to be taught to limit their actions so that they don't become violent or they don't become, you know, antisocial later on. So, for the good of society, people have to be taught discipline. That is the message of the poem, a work of artifice by Marge Percy. So the bonsai is a metaphor for the disciplining of people. Thank you. Hello. Today we'll do the poem "The Night Mail" by W.H. Auden. W.H. Auden's full name is Winston Hugh Auden, and he was a British poet, and he is very famous for poems like Refugee Blues and others, which are included in many anthologies. An anthology is a collection of poems in many anthologies in courses for schools and universities across the world. So we have the poem Night Mail by W.H. Auden. So the poet describes a train. It is called the night mail. So a mail train, it stops at each and every station that there is along along a track. So the mail train is going at night. That is why it's called the night mail. So this is the night mail crossing the border, bringing the check and the postal order. So the night mail is crossing the border between England and Scotland, and on the night mail, the people have sent checks to their family members in Scotland, and they've sent postal orders for money to their relatives in Scotland. So the night mail is bringing these documents, and it's also bringing letters for the rich, letters for the poor, the shop at the corner, the girl next door. So practically the only way people could communicate in the times when the poet was writing was through snail mail. So people used to write letters, and almost everyone used to get a letter from somewhere, from their relatives or friends or pen friends across the world. So everyone, from the rich to the poor, from the people at the shop at the corner to the girl next door, everyone is getting a letter which comes by the night mail. Pulling up Batok, a steady climb, the gradients against her, but she is on time. Batok is a hill or a mountain, so the night mail has to climb up the hill steadily, and the gradient is the inclination. So you have a straight line and you have a horizontal line. If you have a line in between, that is called an inclination. It's called an inclined line. That is the gradient of Batok Hill. So the gradients against her, the night mail has to go up the gradient, but nevertheless she is on time at each station. Past cotton grass and moorland boulder, shoveling white steam over her shoulder. So on the path, on the track next to, on there are fields of cotton grass, and the night mail goes past the fields of cotton grass. And on the moorland is empty place where nothing grows except grass, and there are boulders, there are huge stones, huge stones which the night mail passes. And as the steam engine goes, the steam engine travels, white steam is thrown over her back, over her shoulder, snorting noisily as she passes, silent miles of wind bent grasses. So the sound the steam engine makes is like snorting. Snorting is like a bit like a pressure cooker letting off steam. So it snorts noisily as it passes, and the track is silent. There are only wind, there are only grasses bent by the wind. Birds turn their heads as she approaches, stare from bushes at her blank faced coaches. So the birds see, wonder what's coming. They turn their heads as the night mail approaches, and they stare from the bushes at her empty coaches. So, blank face is when an expressionless face. So the compartments of the train look like expressionless faces. Sheepdogs cannot turn her course, they slumber on with paws across. So, sheepdogs, which are meant to herd the sheep on the pasture or on the sides or on the fields which the night mail passes, and they cannot turn the course of the train, they cannot change the course of the train. So, they sleep on, they slumber on with their paws crossed across each other. In the farm she passes, no one wakes, but a jug in the bedroom gently shakes. So there's a farm which the night mail passes, and no one wakes on the farm. The farmer doesn't wake, neither does his family. But because of the so the because it makes such a loud sound, the vibrations in the bedroom of the farm. There's a jug in the bedroom of the farm which gently shakes to the vibration the night mail makes as it passes. Dawn freshens, her climb is done. So at dawn, at 6 a.m., her climb is done. She's climbed Batock Hill. Down towards Glasgow she descends. Towards the steam tugs, yelping down a glade of cranes. Towards the fields of apparatus, the furnaces set on the dark plain like gigantic chessmen. So after the climb is done, the train has to go down the other side. It is a descent. So she descends towards the city of Glasgow. Glasgow is a city in Scotland. And in Glasgow, there is a harbour. And in the harbour, there are tugboats. Tugboats are the boats which guide the huge ships onto the ocean. The ocean liners cannot maneuver in the harbour, so the tugs they drag the ocean liners to the open ocean, and there the ocean liners start their journey. And on the jetty, on the pier in the harbour, there are cranes which load and unload the ships. There's a number of cranes. A group of cranes is called a glade of cranes. So towards the fields of apparatus, the furnaces. All these are, factories. The furnaces are found in factories, huge boilers which melt steel, which melt iron. So all these are to be found in Glasgow, and the night mail goes in the direction of Glasgow. And all these are set on the dark night plain like gigantic chessmen on a chessboard. All Scotland waits for her. So the whole of Scotland has got some message or the other from someone living elsewhere, and all Scotland waits for the night mail. In dark glens beside pale green lochs, men long for news. So in the dark swamps like glens, or on the lakes, the lochs, the water of the lochs or the lakes is pale green. There are men who want something new, who want to be refreshed by news of their relatives or friends who are elsewhere. Men long for news. And these messages are letters of thanks, letters from pranks, letters of joy from girl and boy, receipted bills and invitations to inspect new stock or to visit relations. So some people get letters of thanks, others get letters from banks. There are messages of love from girl to boy, and there are bills which are received by the people in Scotland, invitations to various parties, and there are invitations also to inspect new stock. Stock means the goods in a warehouse. Some people have to go and inspect the new stock, or there are invitations to visit relations and applications for situations. Some people are seeking jobs in Scotland, so they send applications for situations or vacancies, and timid lovers' declarations. So lovers also declare their love through the letters to their beloved, and gossip from all the nations, news circumstantial, news financials, letters with holiday snaps to enlarge in, letters with faces scrawled on the margin, letters from uncles, cousins, and aunts, letters to Scotland from the south of France, letters of condolence to highlands and lowlands written on paper of every hue, the pink, the violet, the white, and the blue. So there's gossip in all these letters. There's gossip from all the nations across the world, There's news which is circumstantial, which is passing, which is temporary, and there's financial news. And there are letters with holiday photographs which have to be enlarged and placed on the walls of people's houses. And there are letters in which the writers have doodled. They've drawn faces on the margin. And there are letters from uncles and cousins and aunts. There are letters from Scotland, letters to Scotland from the south of France, from people who are enjoying themselves in a holiday in the south of France. Letters of sorry, saying sorry, letters of condolence to Highlands. Highlands are the places in Scotland, from to Highlands and Lowlands. These are places in Scotland, Highlands and Lowlands. And these letters are written on paper of every hue, of every color. These papers are pink colored, they're violet colored, they're white, and they're blue colored. And the chatty, the boring, the adoring, the cold and official, and the heart's outpouring, clever, stupid, short, and long. So some letters are chatty, they go on conversing about something. And there are catty letters in which, there are remarks made about somebody doing something. And there are boring letters, and there are letters of adoring someone. And there are cold and official letters written in government script, government letterheads, and there are hearts outpouring. Someone has declared his love for some girl, some beloved, and there are clever letters and stupid letters and short letters and long letters, and these letters are typed and printed, and the spelled all wrong, and the word the is spelled all wrong. Maybe it's pronounced, maybe it's spelled T-E-D-E, and the spelled all wrong. Thousands are still asleep. So as the night mail approaches the next city, thousands in the city are still asleep, dreaming of terrifying monsters or of friendly tea beside the band in Cranston's or Crawford's. Cranston's and Crawford's are tea shops, so some people are dreaming of a friendly tea in these tea shops called Cranston's and Crawford's, and others may be having nightmares. They may be dreaming of terrifying monsters, and thousands of people are still asleep as the night mail approaches Scotland. Asleep in working Glasgow, asleep in well set Edinburgh. So people are asleep in working Glasgow. Well, Glasgow is a working town, and in well set Edinburgh. Edinburgh is an upper class city, and asleep in granite Aberdeen. Aberdeen is a city in Scotland which is made of stone, perhaps granite stone. All the people in Glasgow, Edinburgh, and Aberdeen are asleep. They continue their dreams as the night mail approaches, but shall wake soon and hope for letters, and none will hear the postman's knock without a quickening of the heart, for who can bear to feel himself forgotten? So, all the people in all the cities of Scotland will wake soon, and they'll hope for letters, and when they hear the postman's knock, they'll become excited. Their hearts will quicken, because they want to be thought of by others. Who can bear himself to feel forgotten? So the night mail is the connecting link between all parts of the world and Scotland. And this is the poem, The Night Mail by W. H. Auden. Thank you. Hello. Today we'll do a poem called Doctor's Journal Entry for August 6, 1945 by Vikram Seth. So the poem says, the morning stretched calm, beautiful, and warm. Sprawling, half clad, I gazed out at the form of shimmering leaves and shadows. So the poem begins with the narrator, who is probably a doctor, uh, begins with the narrator who is probably a doctor in the morning. The morning is calm, beautiful, and warm, and he's sprawling. Sprawling means he's lying on the bed with his legs spread out, and he's half clad. Perhaps he's wearing only the bottom half of his pajamas and a dressing gown. And he's lying on the bed, and he gazes out at the form of shimmering leaves and shadows. So outside in the garden, the leaves are shimmering or shining with the reflection of the sunshine, and there are shadows of trees and plants in the garden. Suddenly, a strong flash, then another, startled me. So, in the distance, he sees a flash of light. It's a huge flash of light, and it's followed by another, and this startles or shocks him. I saw the old stone lantern brightly lit, magnesium flares. So he thinks perhaps there are flares because in 1945 it was the time of the Second World War. So in the Second World War, there were all sorts of battles going on, and to show the position of troops on the ground, they would fire a flare. Flare is like a flame made of, and this flare is made of magnesium. Magnesium is a metal which burns very brightly when lit. So he thinks that that flash of light which he saw is from a magnesium flare. While I debated it, the roof, the walls, and as it seemed, the world collapsed in timber and debris. Dust swirled around me in the garden now, and weird, my drawers and undershirt disappeared. So while he was thinking about what that flash could be, suddenly what happens is the roof of his house, the walls of his house, and even the world, as it seemed to the narrator, collapsed. His house was made of wood, so it collapses in timber. Timber is logs of wood, which with which the house was built. So the house collapses in timber and debris. Debris is rubble, bits of stone, bits of glass, bits of wood. So the house collapses and dust spun around in the wind around him. And in the garden now, so the whole house collapsed into the garden. And as he's looking on, his drawers, that is his underpants and his undershirt, disappeared. So what has happened is that flash which the narrator saw was from the atomic explosion which took place in either Hiroshima or Nagasaki. So the flash which occurred about 1 mile above the ground, that point is called ground zero. The atomic bomb was detonated about 1 mile above the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it caused a very bright light, and the air, which was superheated, it flowed away from the explosion and vaporized everything in its path. So as the narrator looks on, his drawers and his undershirt disappeared from him. A splinter jutted from my mangled thigh. So a piece of wood came out from his thigh. So the whole house has been reduced to absolute rubble, and there's bits of debris flying everywhere, bits of glass, bits of iron, bits of wood, and through his wounded thigh, a splinter of wood came out. My right side bled, so his right side was bleeding. My cheek was torn, and I dislodged detachedly a piece of glass, all the time wondering what had come to pass. So he takes out a piece of glass from himself. The piece of glass has lodged itself into his body, and he doesn't know at all what has happened, and so he's detached about it. He impersonally removed the piece of glass, and he is wondering in his mind what had happened. Where was my wife? Alarmed, I gave a shout. Where are you? Yeko sang. My blood gushed out. So suddenly he thinks of his wife and he feels concern for her. Her name is Yeko-san, and so he calls out to her. And as he's calling out, his blood flows out. The artery in my neck. So he's a doctor. He thinks whether the artery, that is the blood vessel which carries blood to and from the heart, is been severed, and the blood is gushing out from the artery in his neck. He thinks. Scared for my life, I called out, panic stricken, to my wife. So, in this fear, he seeks some consolation in the company of his wife. He's panic stricken, he's absolutely overcome by fright. So, he calls out to his wife. Pale, blood-stained, frightened Yako-san emerged. So, his wife comes out from wherever in the house she was, holding her elbow. We'll be fine, I urged. So when he sees his wife, he feels comforted and he consoles her. He says, we'll be fine. Let's get out quickly. Stumbling to the street, we fell, tripped by something at our feet. So they stumble over the pieces of wood and stone and glass into the street, and then they fall because they hit something with their foot which was at their feet. I gasped out when I saw it was a head. So the thing that is tripped over is only the head of a person. Excuse me, please excuse me. He was dead. So his his habit of being polite makes him say that he's sorry that he touched that, but it's only a head. So he sees that he was dead. A gate had crushed him. So probably the person was standing under an iron gate. The explosion occurred, and the gate fell on him, and his head was severed from his body. There we stood, afraid. Our house standing before us tilted, swayed, toppled, and crushed. So a house which was in front of them tilted, it swung to one side, it shook from side to side, it swayed, and then it collapsed, it toppled and crashed. Fire sprang up in the dust. So the gas lines, which were underneath the pavement, the gas connections which were underneath the pavement of the city, suddenly caught fire, and the pavement exploded in fire. Spread by the wind, it dawned on us we must get to the hospital. So he thinks that they must go to the hospital. We needed aid, and I should help my staff too. So even now he thinks of his duty as a doctor. They needed help themselves. They needed aid themselves, and he should help his staff too in this dangerous situation. Though this made sense to me then, I wonder how I could. So that's a matter of habit. It made sense to him then, but now he wonders how he could have thought of such a thing. My legs gave way, so his legs lose their strength and he sits on the ground. He collapses. I sat down on the ground. Thirst seized me, but no water could be found. So, for some reason or the other, he becomes overcome by thirst, but he could not find any water. My breath was short, but bit by bit my strength seemed to revive. So he gasps in his breath, he gasps in short bursts, but then as he rests, his strength seemed to revive, and I got up at length. I was still without clothes, but I felt no shame. So he still didn't have any clothes on him, but he didn't feel any shame. This thought disturbed me somewhat till I came upon a soldier standing silently who gave the towel round his neck to me. My legs stiffened with dried blood rubbered. So the fact that he didn't have any clothes on his body disturbed him till He walks further and further, and he comes across a soldier who's wearing a towel round his neck, and the soldier gives that towel to him. But his legs, which were bleeding, and the blood had dried, so his legs could not support him. So and they rebelled. I said to Yakusan, she must go on ahead. So he urges his wife to reach safety, and he asks her to go ahead, go on further up the road. She did not wish to, but in our distress, what choice had we? So she did not want to leave him, but in the problematic situation, they didn't have any choice. A dreadful loneliness came over me when she had gone. So when the comforting presence of his wife left him, he became extremely, he felt extreme loneliness, and my mind ran at high speed, my body crept behind. So his mind races, what could he do, what should be done, where should he go, and he thinks along such lines. His mind races, but his body creeps behind. I saw the shadowy forms of people. Some were ghosts, some scarecrows, all were wordless dumb. So he sees people shuffling in the distance ahead. They were shadowy, and some were like ghosts. They were shuffling along with their heads down and their feet hardly rising as they walked, and their hands were hanging by their side, and they had a vacant look in their faces. And some were like ghosts, some were like scarecrows. Scarecrows, that is, they looked extremely deformed. Their hair was all standing on end, and they all were without, they were all were silent. They were wordless, dumb, with the shock which they had received. Arms stretched straight out, shoulder to dangling hand. So their arms were stretched straight out. They were in a state of shock and disbelief. And as the arms were stretched out, their hands hung down. It took some time for me to understand the friction of their burns caused so much pain. So the friction caused by the rubbing of the arms against the side of the body made them hold out their hands so that the hands dangled. So the friction which hurt them so much caused so much pain. They feared to chafe flesh against flesh. So they feared to rub their own flesh against the flesh on the sides of their body. Those who could shuffled in a blank parade toward the hospital. So those who could walk shuffled. Shuffled means they walked without raising their feet. They just scraped the ground and they walked towards the hospital in a blank parade. They were all extremely quiet, did not say a word. They were in a state of shock, and they shuffled towards the hospital. I saw dismayed a woman with a child stand in my path. So a woman with a child stands in the path of the narrator, both without clothes. Had they come back from the bath? So he thinks that perhaps the woman was having a bath when the explosion occurred, and she still had a child in her arms. I turned my gaze, but was at a loss that she should stand thus, till I came across a man without clothes. And now the thought arose that some strange thing had stripped us of our clothes. So he sees a woman with an infant in her arms without clothes, both were without clothes, and then she's standing naked in the street, and he doesn't understand, he's at a loss to understand. Then he sees a man without clothes, and now he thinks, how could their clothes be removed from their bodies without their knowledge, and how could they be standing naked in the streets? So, what strange thing had occurred? He still doesn't realize that the nuclear explosions have taken place. The face of an old woman on the ground was marred with suffering. So there was an old woman on the ground, and her face was distorted, it was twisted by suffering, but she made no sound. So she's not even whimpering, she's not even making a sound in her throat. She's silently suffering. Silence was common to us all, so everyone there is absolutely quiet. I heard no cries of anguish or a single word. He did not even hear a cry of anguish, a cry of pain, and he did not hear a single word. So they're all dumbstruck at what has happened, and that is the end of the poem. Thank you. Hello, we'll do the poem I Remember by the poet Thomas Hood. So, here in the poem, the poet is nostalgic, or he wishes that he were as happy as he was when he was a child. Now he's a grown up man, and he would like to relive his childhood. So the poet says, I remember the house where I was born, the little window where the sun came peeping in at morn. So the poet remembers the house where he was born, and he remembers the room from the window of which the sun came through in the morning. He never came a wink too soon, nor brought too long a day, but now I often wish the night had borne my breath away. So when the poet was a boy, the dawn never came too early and the day was not too long, because the poet used to enjoy himself every moment as it when he was a boy. The day was not too long, day was not too prolonged by too many worries. But now, as a man, as an adult, he often wishes that his breath had left uh, in the night. It had been carried away in the night. And now his life is probably full of so many worries and cares and anxieties. And he doesn't know the way out. So he remembers his childhood with nostalgia. And in the second stanza, the poet says, I remember the roses red and white, the violets and the lily cups, those flowers made of light. So in the garden of the poet's house, when he was there as a boy, there were roses which were red roses and white roses, and there were violets and there were lilies, and those flowers made his day even brighter. The flowers themselves seemed to be made of light, and he was happy, and these flowers reflected his happiness. The lilacs were the robin bird, and where my brother said, the laburnum on his birthday, the tree is living yet. So the poet also remembers the lilacs. Lilacs are purple flowers where the robin bird, the robin redbreast, built its nest, and where in the garden the poet's brother had set a laburnum tree on his birthday, and that tree has grown and is still living. The poet says in the third stanza, I remember when I used to swing and thought the air must rush as fresh to swallows on the wing. So the poet says that as a boy, he used to swing on, the playground swing. There was a swing in his garden, and he thought the air must still be as fresh as it is in the higher reaches of the atmosphere to swallow birds which are flying in the sky. So the air itself was so fresh as a boy. And he says, my spirit flew in feathers then that is so heavy now, and summer pools could hardly cool the fever on my brow. So when he was a boy, he was so happy. His spirit used to fly as though he had feathers and he could fly like a bird. But now his spirit is heavy, it is laden with burdens, and even if he were to take a bath in a summer pool, the fever in his mind, the perspiration on his brow, on his forehead, could not be cooled. I remember the fir trees dark and high. I used to think their slender tops were close against the sky. The poet says he remembers that there were fir trees. Fir trees are like Christmas trees, only much taller, and those fir trees were dark and high in the night. And the poet used to think the conical tops, the slender tops, almost touched the sky. It was a childish ignorance, but now it is little joy to know I am further off from heaven than when I was a boy. So, and when the poet thought as a boy that the tops of the fir trees touched the sky, it was childish ignorance. But now he thinks it gives him little joy to know that he is farther off from heaven than when he was a boy. So as a boy, he had an heavenly state of existence. He was happy, he was full of joy, he could leap, he could jump, he could play, and he was happy. But now, that heavenly state of existence, when he's an adult, is farther and farther off from his life, and he can never relive the moments of his childhood, and he's farther off from heaven than when he was a boy. So, this poem describes the feeling of growing up to be an adult. Thank you. Hello, today we'll do a poem called Skimbleshanks, the Railway Cat, by the poet T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot's full name was Thomas Stearns Eliot, and he was born in England, but he studied at Harvard College, Harvard University in the US. He studied at Oxford University in the UK, and he studied at the Sorbonne in France. And he had many great teachers like George Santayana, the philosopher. And so he became a Nobel Prize winner. He's a Nobel Prize winner in literature. So here he's written a poem for children. So it's a children's poem called Skimbleshanks, the Railway Cat. Skimbleshanks is a name which is made up. It's supposed to be humorous. So anyway, we'll read the poem. So it says, there's a whisper down the line at 11:39 when the night mail's ready to depart, saying, Skimble, where is Skimble? Has he gone to hunt the thimble? We must find him or the train can't start. So the night mail is ready to depart at 11:39 p.m. from the station, and people are whispering among themselves, where is Skimble? Skimble, where is Skimble? They say. Skimble is the cat, and he is the sort of supervisor of the whole train, and they wonder if he's gone to hunt the thimble. Thimble is something that tailors put on the tips of their fingers to stop the needles from pricking them when they sew clothes. So, anyway, it's has he gone to hunt the Skimble? The people say, talk among themselves. Because without Skimbleshanks, the train can't start. All the guards and all the porters and the station master's daughters, they're searching high and low, saying, Skimble, where is Skimble? For unless he's very nimble, then the night mail just can't go. So all the people of the station, working at the station, like the guards, railway guards, and the porters. Porters are people who carry the luggage for the passengers, and the station master's daughters. They're searching up and down, high and low across the station, because unless Skimble is very nimble, unless he's very quick, nimble means quick and agile, unless he's very quick, the night mail just can't go. So it's nearing time for the departure, but the night mail cannot leave without Skimbleshanks. At 11:42, then the signal's nearly due, and the passengers are frantic to a man. Then Skimble will appear and he'll saunter to the rear. He's been busy in the luggage van. So all the passengers are frantic. They're really pressurized to find Skimble. Every passenger, to a man, is frantic with worry about whether they'll start on time. And at this moment, Skimble will appear and he'll saunter to the rear. Saunter means walk in a relaxed manner. He'll saunter to the back of the train, and he's been busy in the luggage van. He gives one flash of his glass green eyes, and the signal goes all clear. So he looks at the people with his glass green eyes. That is, he has cat eyes, and finally the signal is given, and all clear is blown. So the train can start, and we are off at last for the northern part of the northern hemisphere. So the train is going to start towards the northern city in the northern hemisphere. You may say that by and large it is Kimball who's in charge of the sleeping car express. So it's a night train, so people will sleep on the night train, and it is Kimball Shanks who's in charge of that night mail or the sleeping car express. From the driver and the guards to the bagman playing cards, he will supervise them all more or less. So he supervises all the employees on the train, from the engine driver to the guards to the bagmen. The bagmen are the people who carry the bags in the luggage van. Skimble Shanks will supervise them all more or less. Down the corridor he paces and examines all the faces of the travelers in the first and third. So he goes up and down the corridor, examines the faces of all the passengers in the first class compartments as well as the third class compartments. He establishes control by a regular patrol, and he'd know at once if anything occurred. So, by patrolling up and down the train, he establishes control that every passenger has to behave himself or herself. And if anything occurs on the train, anything untoward, then he'll immediately know at once. He'll watch you without winking, and he sees what you're thinking, and it's certain that he doesn't approve of hilarity and riot. So the folk are very quiet when Skimble is about and on the move. So he'll watch people without winking, without blinking his eyes, and he guesses what you're thinking, and for sure it is certain that he doesn't approve of hilarity and riot. So he doesn't approve of people partying, doesn't approve of wild behavior. So all the folk, all the people are very quiet when Skimble is about and on the move up and down the corridor of the train. You can play no pranks with Skimble Shanks, so you can't play any jokes with Skimble Shanks. He's a cat that cannot be ignored. So nothing goes wrong on the northern mail when Skimble Shanks is aboard. So nothing goes wrong on the northern mail when Skimble Shanks is on patrol, supervising everything that is going on. Oh, it's very pleasant when you have found your little den with your name written on the door, and the berth is very neat and with a newly folded sheet, and there's not a speck of dust on the floor. So how does Kimball manage? He sees that all the compartments, all the berths, all the the compartments are very clean. Each passenger who has reserved a berth on the train has his name written on the door of the compartment, and in the berth there is a bed, and the bed has a newly folded sheet that it's been freshly washed or laundered, and the floor has been swept clean, so there's not a speck of dust on the floor. So when the passengers come in to the train, they find it very pleasant to start their journey. There is every sort of light. You can make it dark or bright. There is a handle that you turn to make a breeze. So every sort of light, whether it's a reading light or a night light or a fluorescent or a light for the full compartment, you can turn down the brightness of the light, and the compartments also have a fan, and you turn the handle to switch the fan on and make a breeze for yourself. There's a funny little basin you're supposed to wash your face in, and a crank to shut the window if you sneeze. And so there is a wash basin in each compartment, and you can wash your face in it, and there is a lever or a crank to shut the window if the wind blowing makes you too cold and you sneeze. Then the guard looks in politely and will ask you very brightly, "Do you like your morning tea weak or strong?" Then the guard looks in, he wants to take orders for the next morning from the passengers, and he asks each passenger whether they want their morning tea weak or strong, light or strong. But Skimble's just behind him and was ready to remind him. So Skimble knows the preference of each passenger, and Skimble reminds the guard not to disturb the passengers, and he reminds him of what each passenger wants. For Skimble won't let anything go wrong. And when you creep into your cozy berth and pull up the counterpane, you ought to reflect that it's very nice to know that you won't be bothered by mice. So when the passenger creeps into his berth, that is on his bed to rest, to sleep, and the berth is very cozy or comfortable, and he pulls down the counterpane, that is the second window which won't let any light in, so that they won't be disturbed when the sun rises in the morning. Then the passengers ought to reflect that it's very nice because they won't be bothered by mice. Because Skimbleshanks has seen to it that the railway compartments are totally hygienic and totally fit for human use. You can leave all that to the railway cat, the cat of the railway train. In the watches of the night, he is always fresh and bright. So, in the watches of the night, whether it's 11 p.m. or whether it's 1 a.m. or 2 p.m., 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., in all these parts of the night, he is always fresh and bright. He is always awake and alert. And every now and then he has a cup of tea with perhaps a drop of scotch while he's keeping on the watch, only stooping here and there to catch a flea. So every now and then, occasionally he has a cup of tea, and sometimes he laces that cup of tea with some scotch whiskey. So that will make it even stronger, and it will give him some comfort, and he's keeping watch on the train, and he only stoops or bends now and then to catch a flea which is moving through the compartment. You were fast asleep at Crewe, and so you never knew that he was walking up and down the station. So the night mail stops at a station called Crewe, Crewe, and when the night mail stopped at Crewe, it was deep night, like 1 a.m. So the passengers never knew that he was walking up and down the station. He was sleeping all the while he was busy at Carlisle, where he greets the station master with elation. So the passengers were also sleeping at the next station, which was Carlisle, and Skimbleshanks had greeted the station master with elation or joy. Elation means joy. But you saw him at Dumfries, where he speaks to the police if there's anything they ought to know about. So at Dumfries, that is the third station the night mail stops at, maybe the passengers saw Skimbleshanks, where he speaks to the police about anything that's gone on untoward on the train, and the police ought to know about that. When you get to Gallowgate, there you do not have to wait, for Skimbleshanks will help you to get out. So finally, when the destination of the passenger arrives at Gallowgate, you don't have to wait, for Skimbleshanks will escort you down the steps of the train. He'll help you to get out. He gives you a wave of his long brown tail, which says, "I'll see you again. You'll meet without fail on the midnight mail, the cat of the railway train." So to bid goodbye to the passengers, Skimbleshanks gives a wave of his long brown tail, which says that they'll meet again. The passenger and Skimbleshanks will meet again, and finally, without fail, the passengers will meet on the midnight mail, the cat of the railway train, that is Skimbleshanks. Thank you.